Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 501 Under the Equivalent, World Peace. Finally, after a round of not-so-intense confrontation and gamesmanship, the military, Sector 7, and the New York Police Department on the stage reached a phased consensus. The plan they came up with at this time was roughly that all matters concerning the Transformers would be handled by these three departments at the same time. This was also the only consensus they reached after this round of discussions and weighing of interests. Exclusivity, and the intention that this consensus wanted to express to the outside world was also very clear, that is, to preemptively exclude the possibility of organizations and departments other than these three departments from intervening in matters related to the Transformers at least. Once other national agencies want to intervene in this matter, the three of them will have a common position similar to allies. In other words, if an external department wants to intervene, they will all have the obligation to keep it out. Of course, how to formulate corresponding countermeasures still needs to be determined according to the specific situation. There is a lot of flexibility in this. For example, if it is a purely foreign force, such as some personnel from outside the United States, then naturally exclusion is the main goal. But if it involves domestic forces, or even direct orders from higher-level official leaders, then another attitude needs to be adopted. Therefore, once this consensus was put on the table, it immediately aroused dissatisfaction from S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury, who had been secretly sitting on the sidelines, finally couldn't sit still at this time and directly vetoed it. I don't think you have the authority to directly formulate this exclusive agreement as an independent department affiliated with a multinational organization. I think your S.H.I.E.L.D. should remain silent now. General Ross adjusted his glasses at this time, looking at him with his eyes that did not carry any emotional color. It is precisely because S.H.I.E.L.D.'s authority comes from the World Security Council that we should speak out at this moment. After all, this involves the Transformers as extraterrestrial life groups with high intelligence. They have a considerable degree of autonomy and will not land in a specific country or region if they appear somewhere abroad. Are you going to control them according to this agreement? Nick Fury retorted at this time, with a trace of awe-inspiring light unconsciously appearing in his only remaining eye. Okay, that was just the reflection of the vitreous body. Of course, our military has a considerable number of military bases in the Middle East and various regions of the world, and we are fully capable of doing so. Knowing that he was talking nonsense, Ross still maintained an indifferent appearance at this time. It makes people want to punch him, if it happens within the 5 permanent member states. Are you going to do the same? After saying that, Nick Fury looked at Ross with a serious face, his eyes closely watching every movement of the other party. After hearing his words, General Ross frowned subconsciously, obviously starting to become a little hesitant and uncertain. I think S.H.I.E.L.D. can take on this role. In short, after another intense discussion and weighing of trade-offs, the two sides finally reached a compromise on this matter. During this period, basically only the U.S. military and S.H.I.E.L.D. were clashing. As for the remaining ones, the New York Police Department and Sector 7, to be honest, the former is more like a group of neighborhood police compared to the military and S.H.I.E.L.D., and its jurisdiction is not large. Although New York is known as the world's largest city, it is still too small compared to the entire United States and the entire world. In Liang Yue's view, the reason for including it is purely to make up the numbers and to reconcile the interest disputes and entanglements from the American political circles. As for the latter, Sector 7, it basically has no interest in managing affairs involving regions and countries outside the United States. The existence of this department was once very important, relying on the reverse deduction of Megatron in the Iceman project. All technologies with important milestone significance on the human modern technology tree are related to it: integrated chips, lasers, space flight technology, automobiles. Even Liang Yue found the shadow of the Transformers in the arc reactor, a nuclear fusion technology. Regarding Starks, therefore, it is absolutely appropriate to say that Megatron is one of the foundations and sources of the human modern technology tree. However, with the successive loss of Megatron and the Allspark, and the increasingly frequent appearance of Transformers in human society, the value of Sector 7 has also continued to weaken until the end of the Transformers' first movie plot. Sector 7 was also unloaded and killed, and was directly disbanded by the President of the United States. Therefore, from beginning to end, The military and S.H.I.E.L.D. have always been the focus of this meeting and the main contenders for interests. They themselves obviously knew this. After clarifying the topic, the game and argument between the two sides also began to become clear during this process. Captain America, Natasha, Sam, and even Liang Yue could not interrupt at all because the topics they were involved in were too big. As individuals, they basically had no qualifications to participate. Soon, this discussion meeting entered the last agenda item, that is the issue of Bumblebee's temporary ownership, or rather, which side he will temporarily serve. What is involved here is no longer just the interests represented by Bumblebee as a Transformer, it may also greatly affect which side the Transformer group will serve in the future. This is a real benefit. It is related to the improvement of weapons and equipment and scientific research level, and even the actual impact of related combat units. General Ross and Director Fury must argue on the basis of reason and not given at all, without any sense of humility. Liang Yue also has something to say about this. I think that Bumblebee, as an independent individual with high intelligence who can make choices independently, can have his own ideas on this issue. When Ross and Nick Fury were arguing about this with red faces and thick necks, and white foam was already faintly visible at the corners of their mouths, Liang Yue, as the host and owner, finally couldn't help but speak out and say a fair word. The two directors also breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, and then they all looked at Bumblebee, who had been sitting on the wooden platform staring blankly. Then, what choice will you make, Bumblebee? You can say it boldly, we will respect your choice. That's right. Looking at the two old guys who were still a little aggressive in front of him, Bumblebee subconsciously scratched his helmet with his fingers, and then hesitated and said, if we encounter some things that are difficult to choose, in our team, Optimus Prime usually makes the decision, but the last time he communicated, he issued an order to me. It is to find the glasses that have the coordinates of the Allspark engraved on them. Then, where are those glasses now? Nick Fury looked subconsciously at Sam, who was still a little dazed next to him. After hearing this, obviously, as the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he knows some information about the Iceman project on the other side. General Ross was a little late in realizing it. The glasses are in my hands. Liang Yue consciously reached out and gestured to everyone at this time. Then I'll follow you for now. Bumblebee made a decisive decision at this time. Chapter 502, Identity, Value and Recognition. After listening to Bumblebee's words, everyone present, especially Ross and Nick Fury, widened their eyes. They had been arguing and negotiating for so long, only turned up benefiting an outsider. That's right, an outsider, whether from a national perspective or in terms of power divisions. Liang Yue didn't belong to their camp. If this led to inadvertently involving the eastern country behind him, the impact would be significant. Moreover, Liang Yue had many secrets, and the futuristic technology in his basement was also highly coveted. If it weren't for the fact that he had repeatedly demonstrated formidable strength, and that this strength was rapidly increasing at an alarming rate, in secret, those organizations and individuals with sufficient armed forces would have already devoured and plundered this manner. If the Transformers, an alien species, were to join in the future, even if they didn't form a collaborative combat alliance, just the fact that these mechanical beings were in the basement of this manor, helping Liang Yue with scientific research, would be troublesome enough. It's not that individuals can't possess such formidable strength. However, someone like Liang Yue, who is outside their control and regulatory system, has definitely exceeded their limit of tolerance. Therefore, when they heard that Bumblebee wanted to follow Liang Yue, not only Ross and Nick Fury, but also Director Stacy and Simmons from Sector 7, who had become much more cooperative, frowned, especially Simmons, who clearly knew what Bumblebee and the other Transformers wanted even if he couldn't be 100% sure. The coordinates Bumblebee mentioned likely pointed to the location of the giant metal cube in their base. Just by considering the energy transmitted from that cube, which could directly transform electronic devices into mechanical life forms, one could guess 8 or 9 out of 10. So, Simmons was conflicted. He was torn between whether to reveal this information now. If he did, Bumblebee would definitely go directly to Sector 7 with him. Subsequently, the arriving Transformers would also establish some kind of connection with their side. However, the consequences of doing so would be equally severe. The military, S.H.I.E.L.D., and even the New York Police Department would likely join in the competition at that time. Many more people would probably return to Sector 7 with him. The secrets and foundation of their department would also be exposed to the public. Sector 7's independence and authority would inevitably be interfered with by all parties. To make matters worse, the long-standing Iceman project and the magical metal cube would probably be compromised and become public property to some extent. To put it bluntly, the country would be in danger. The necessity of their department's existence would also be further weakened. Therefore, Simmons was very hesitant at the moment. His breathing began to quicken unconsciously, and the corners of his mouth twitched from time to time, but in the end, the middle-aged man in black still didn't have the courage to make up his mind and reveal the secrets of the department. I think that pair of glasses should be temporarily elevated to public item. What do you say? After considering his words, Director Fury looked at Liang Yue with a slightly tentative expression. I think so too. General Ross pursed his lips, stirring his coffee with a small spoon. After noticing Liang Yue's gaze, he timed it perfectly, looked up, and met his eyes. Director Stacy didn't speak, but her eyes also carried a hint of inquiry. I don't think so. Bumblebee said before that his people would land on Earth in about half a month. That is to say, the glasses and the coordinates on them have a time limit for both Bumblebee and their enemies. The fewer people who know the specific information on the coordinates during this period, the lower the risk. Liang Yue could naturally see the thoughts of the people present and knew their plans. Too bad. I don't care. It's right not to let more people know the specific information on the coordinates. So what are you planning to do with Bumblebee? At this time, Stark, who had been sitting next to him without saying much, suddenly opened his mouth and asked the point that everyone was most concerned about. Bumblebee? I've already said that even the intelligence information of the Transformers has a certain lag. Now those enemies hiding in the dark, most likely still think that the glasses are in Sam's hands, so I need Bumblebee to stay by Sam's side to protect his safety. Liang Yue replied, as a matter of course. In this way, not only your classmate, but also the children in that school, and even the people of New York City will be in danger. Director Stacy also joined the conversation at this time. Obviously, compared to the Transformers, a super-standard combat unit, and the interests it represents, he, as the director of the New York Police Department, values his responsibilities more. Moreover, as a law enforcement department that maintains the daily security of society, the police department generally doesn't need high-powered weapons. As for Bumblebee's cockpit, it can be temporarily given to Captain America and Natasha afterwards. Liang Yue looked at Bumblebee in the back and continued to ask, buddy, you should be able to create a layer of electronic camouflage on yourself, right? No problem, sir. Then at this time, once those hostile targets appear, the threat will no longer be a threat. So, you want to carry out planned interception, or even entrapment, of those mechanical beings. Hearing this, Ross wiped his glasses and showed a thoughtful expression. It depends on your abilities. In addition, the route Bumblebee takes will also need to be screened. You can try to choose some abandoned factories and sparsely populated places to start. The solution that Liang Yue is now giving naturally takes into account the interests of all parties, the wreckage of the Transformers, or even living individuals, and the extraordinary technology they represent, are all that the military and S.H.I.E.L.D. are after. As for Bumblebee's previous expression of wanting to temporarily follow Liang Yue, it became dispensable after he was sent out as bait because, for a long time to come, the people who will be fighting and getting along with him will have changed from Liang Yue himself to Captain America, Natasha, and the combat team sent by the military. This leaves a great deal of room for manipulation in the end. Emotional belonging is something that requires time and effort to cultivate. It is not something that can be decided by just a few words or a choice. Therefore, after hearing Liang Yue's arrangements, the atmosphere at the conference table eased, and they quickly reached a consensus and moved on to the next procedure. Chapter 503, Transparent Metal, 2. The meeting barely ended around noon. As the host, Liang Yue treated everyone to lavish lunch at his home. During this time, at Ross's request, Liang Yue once again led the group on a tour of his underground research laboratory. Compared to the last visit, the laboratory had undergone further changes. Although the time that had passed wasn't long, some key technologies had been incorporated. For example, the remote-controlled robot designed by Ivan Vinko, the special steel armor he wore, and the transforming mechanical bird that suddenly appeared and attacked Liang Yue and his classmates that day, and so on. In addition, the emergence of the public world brought Liang Yue extra free time. The Water Margin Heroes world is a martial arts world with some fictional elements and a classic historical background. As a product of modern technology, the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu, doesn't have a significant role to play in it. The extra time was naturally used by it for scientific research. Thus, if we also consider the Xiao Wu clones laboratory in the MIG world, although all three different locations are engaged in scientific research, under Liang Yue's deliberate planning, the research and development directions of the different Xiao Wu clones are also different. Therefore, the scientific research projects in Liang Yue's underground laboratory have increased again, and the depth of scientific research involved has made considerable progress compared to before. For example, the gravity wave skateboard from the intermediate technology plane now. With the efforts of the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu, It can achieve simple copying and pasting from the principle that is, copying another small anti-gravity levitation device by imitating the original, and considerable progress has been made in the semi-intelligent control system, transformation, and color-changing system of the skateboard regarding that light gold and translucent metal that was additionally derived from this skateboard. Now, with Xiao Wu's efforts, it can also adjust the color of this metal material relatively freely. In addition, under the intelligent AI Xiao Wu's summary and induction, this type of transparent metal material has now been separately designated an area in the basement for key research and development. The most satisfying transparent metal for Liang Yue has a hardness of about 90% of that of diamond, and its high temperature resistance, low temperature resistance, and tensile resistance are close to the level of carbon composite materials. It completely meets the standards of aerospace materials, and it is a general trend to replace glass with it. It is a pity that the production cost of this thing is very high and it cannot be mass-produced. It can only be used as a private customized product of the laboratory for the time being. In addition, other experimental areas in the basement have also made considerable research progress. For example, the holographic imaging technology independently separated from the real panoramic sandbox. Only a marble-sized sphere is needed to instantly release a holographic projection that can fill the entire room. After connecting to a digital signal, it can process the information flow by itself, and then act as a holographic display screen to play various TV programs, film and animation works, etc. in real time. It can achieve a pretty good interactive experience when used to play games now, under Liang Yue's deliberate guidance. The Xiao Wu clone is continuing to delve into this technology in terms of personalization, portability, and intelligent interaction. The biotechnology that Liang Yue focused on introducing during the last visit has also made considerable progress. Bone fracture reconnection, burn recovery, treatment and maintenance of some chronic diseases, and even various daily chemical cosmetics, cleaning products, etc. have also made many achievements with the construction of Liang Yue's domestic enterprises. The listing plan for this series of products has now been put on the agenda. So, before this, you already had a mechanical creature in your laboratory as a research and reference object. Looking at the mechanical bird that was fixed on the metal table inside the laboratory with its limbs spread wide, through the thick transparent metal, Stark didn't seem surprised at all at this time. He propped his hands on the metal wall, glanced at Liang Yue next to him, and then focused all his attention on observing the experimental operation inside. As for the others, it was pretty much the same. Nick Fury, Simmons, Ross, Stacy, Sam, Natasha, Steve, and others were all like this. Only Michaela, this newcomer, was looking carefully at this time, holding a set of cosmetics produced by the laboratory that Liang Yue had just given her. She looked around from time to time, obviously liking it very much. I only got this thing not long ago, in the apartment near the school. Sam, Peter, Gwen, and the others were there at the time. We were discussing the glasses and the coordinates on them. As a result, this guy jumped out directly and swept us with 2 Gatling guns from outside the window. After that, I took the energy reactor from his chest and used it as experimental material for research. While saying this, Liang Yue asked the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu, to open the door of the laboratory and let everyone in. It seems that they are determined to get those glasses. The coordinates marked on them must be a very important item. After entering the door, Ross's eyes had been fixed on the mechanical bird on the table, and then he pretended to be very casual and continued to ask him, how is it? What have you gained from the research on this thing? Yes, but the result is surprisingly ordinary. The biggest gain is the turbine on the wings, the plasma dual-use electric thruster. Apart from that, whether it's the rotary machine gun, tracking explosive bombs, infrared imaging device, laser emitter, the thermal cutting blade on the claws, or the bird wing ejection throwing knife or something, either they can be widely used, or you can find many research teams on the market that are researching this type of technology. Liang Yue spread his hands and replied when he heard this. In fact, he had already expected this result before. After all, according to the setting of the plot, most of the human technological achievements in modern society are derived from the research and reverse engineering of Megatron as a member of the Transformers. The technology on this mechanical bird is unlikely to surpass Megatron. However, even so, Liang Yue still benefited a lot from it. Many technologies that may not be cutting edge on the market, but have a considerable degree of intellectual property rights and confidentiality, the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu, can directly obtain ready-made ones from this bird. This is a pretty good complement to Liang Yue's shortcomings. Chapter 504 1915. Night tonight, the night sky is covered with dense clouds, and not a single star can shine through. However, the top floor of the library tower is quite lively at this moment. The reason, needless to say, After a 3-month hiatus, another journey of the myriad realms is about to begin. Only such a reason can summon back the women who seem to be fascinated and immersed in the public world. At this moment, the time has already reached past 11 o'clock at midnight, and the hour hand is about to cross 12 o'clock. A mixture of tension and liveliness is spreading among the crowd, and it is intensifying. Even the increasingly strong wind in the sky cannot suppress the fiery emotions in everyone's hearts. Soon, the sound of scattered raindrops began to ring in the sky and on earth, on the ground, on the soil, on the water, on the leaves. Gradually, large swathes of heavy rain began to fall, dancing wildly with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, a dense rain curtain hung down between the sky and the earth. In this situation, the women at this time are still unaware, still immersed in the communication between each other, and the longing for the myriad realms. In comparison, Liang Yue's side seems much calmer. After all, by now, he has already become accustomed to going to another world every once in a while. With Liang Yue's gradually increasing strength, the things he is considering at this moment are no longer just how to survive in the myriad realms, or how to complete the system tasks well and quickly. Occasionally, he would use the convenience of the rules to earn some extra points, etc. Although these are very important, the key point that Liang Yue is pursuing is how to make himself more complete, harmonious, and improve his strength without hidden dangers. After all, when it comes down to it, the system tasks are just a kind of guidance issued to him by the system, and making himself stronger is the foundation for him to sit firmly on the fishing platform in the future. As soon as the voice fell, before anyone else could react, Liang Yue's whole person turned into a ray of light and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. In an instant, when he reappeared, he was already on a semi-transparent, heavy stone platform surrounded by thick fog. It was the place where Liang Yue, Alwyn, teacher Shizuka, and others went to the public world together before, the place used to choose personal identity backgrounding. The 6th Myriad Realms world experience time has arrived, and the plane coordinates are being randomly selected. The plane world that the host will enter this time is DC Universe. In order to avoid some unnecessary troubles, the system has arranged a disguised identity for the free host. Before officially entering the experience world, the host can also spend a certain amount of points to further adjust and modify the identity background. As the system's voice fell, the identity selection directory that had been used once before suddenly appeared in front of him again. Liang Yue subconsciously glanced at it, and after discovering that the identity arranged for him by the system was still a Taoist priest, he stopped paying attention. After all, the DC Universe world is a plane that can be regarded as equal to the Marvel Universe in reality. As long as the identity does not involve certain specific bloodline problems, the others are often just minor details. Moreover, Liang Yue does not have any extra points on his body at this time to arrange some bloodlines that he can see in reality. The second phase of the system task is still in progress, but it is far from being completed in the public world. It has not yet entered the official plot time period, and even the corresponding system tasks have not been issued, let alone any points. In short, this ordinary identity background is like an admission ticket to him. That's all. DC Universe. This plane is complicated, and the time span is long. With my current strength, I shouldn't be involved in too many plot characters. Otherwise, if a Dr. Manhattan comes along, I'll have to be blindfolded. However, a plane of this level shouldn't appear at this stage, right? With my current strength, it is basically impossible to make a big difference, but if I just muddle along for a few years and directly mix until the end of the experience, wouldn't it be a bit too wasteful? Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help scratching his temples, feeling a little tangled in his heart, but then he let go of his mood. After all, there are many powerful planes in the myriad realms, and DC is just one of them. Although it is blown a bit too much, it seems that a god who ran out of some corner can arbitrarily manipulate abstract concepts such as time, space, energy, and thought. But in Liang Yue's view, this is probably just the result of the special world rules of this world. If you change the place, it shouldn't be so willful. Keep the identity unchanged. Let's start entering. With a wave of his hand, after pushing away the selection box in front of him, Liang Yue temporarily put aside the messy thoughts in his heart. His line of sight had just stayed in the thick fog on the opposite side for a moment, and his whole person turned into a ray of light again, disappearing from this platform without a trace. In an instant, the world spun, and the light changed in thousands of ways. Liang Yue subconsciously closed his eyelids at this time, and when he opened his eyes again, the scene in front of him had changed to a strange world. Guns and mandarin jackets, rickshaws, barbershops on the street, old people with braids, female students wearing classic blue dresses, a troupe of street performers, an old woman carrying a pole and wooden buckets selling soy milk along the street, Along with a scene of street scenes that seemed like a microcosm of the old era, a burst of strange information instantly transmitted to Liang Yue's mind. After a few breaths, he had already understood the era and background. He was in World War I, Republic of China, Wonder Woman. Liang Yue didn't find it strange that he was in this time period. After all, the span of the DC universe itself is very large. As a world with complex characters and a very rich plot, you can only appreciate the beauty of it from the beginning. But as the earliest plot development segment in the movie universe, the timeline is currently in from Wonder Woman's birth on Paradise Island to her killing the god of war Ares. It was only a few months at most after that. This lady chose to live in seclusion because of the pain of losing her lover and the disappointment with mankind. It was not until half a century later that she began to reappear. However, Liang Yue is doing well here in this journey of the myriad realms. The system actually gave him a full 30 years of experience, and now, it's 1915. Not long after the start of World War I. Chapter 505 Gunfighting. Ding-ling-ling. This Taoist master, please make way. Just then, a crisp ringing sound came from behind. Liang Yue turned around and saw a middle-aged man pulling a rickshaw, jogging over from behind with a passenger. Seeing this, Liang Yue subconsciously took a few steps towards the side of the road. During the passing, he caught a glimpse of a woman in a dark kimono sitting in the rickshaw, holding an oil paper umbrella. With a dignified appearance, picturesque eyebrows, and a hint of aloofness in her indifferent expression. Upon closer inspection, the woman's skin was very white, but not naturally so, nor was it the whiteness from cosmetics, but rather a kind of unnatural paleness, like in a painting. After a brief and subtle glance at him, the woman looked ahead, slowly disappearing into the crowd as the rickshaw puller ran. That woman is strange. Although there was no direct contact, Liang Yue could still see some oddities on the woman riding in the rickshaw through his eyesight, which far exceeded that of ordinary people. It was an energy that he had never encountered in the previous world. It was somewhat similar to the cold and yin attribute chakra within Orochimaru's body. However, the activity level of this energy was not high, vaguely carrying a feeling of deathly stillness. 1915, it's only been a few years since the last Qing emperor abdicated. Has the former beeping city already begun to be plagued by evil? Looking at the direction in which the rickshaw was leaving, Liang Yue narrowed his eyes. The current China is in the early years of the Republic of China, just in time for World War I in Europe, a rare window of opportunity for development, and it happens to be a progressive era of popular thought and ideological agitation. Under such circumstances, it is not convenient for me to do much. The awakening of a nation ultimately depends on internal driving forces, which requires a process, and I, alone, am ultimately weak and cannot change too much. Fortunately, 30 years is enough for me to accomplish many things. With these thoughts flashing through his mind, Liang Yue made up his mind and, without lingering, straightened his Taoist robe and walked forward along the street. After this descent, in addition to the simple cyan black Taoist robe he was wearing, the system also gave him a Laoquan steel sword. It probably only weighed 3 to 5 pounds, feeling light in his hand for Liang Yue at this time. Its decorative significance far outweighed its practical use. If it weren't for the fact that a small purification talisman was engraved on the blade of this sword, Liang Yue might have thrown it into the stronghold world on the spot, leaving it gathering dust. He ordered a cage of large meat buns from a roadside snack stall and inquired about the city's information. Then, he ate while heading towards the direction of the gold and silver shop. His purpose, of course, was to exchange for some funds. Having just arrived, Liang Yue needed a sum of money sufficient to support his life and various activities. Unlike the silver and copper coins commonly used in the Northern Song dynasty in the public world, the legal currency of the Republic of China era is the silver dollar, which was also a kind of silver coin. According to some information, in the early years of the Republic of China, a tael of gold could be exchanged for 30 silver dollars. A well-off family would probably need to spend 15 silver dollars a month. It is said that when Mr. Lu Xun was a professor at Peking University, he seemed to be able to earn 300 silver dollars a month. As for Liang Yue, if he wanted to settle down in Beeping City, how could he not have several thousand silver dollars on hand? In addition, there's Siko Senpai and the others who will be coming later. Fortunately, in his plan, other than the initial purchase of a residence as a base, which might cost a lot, there wouldn't be many other places to spend money. Moreover, if he wanted to get money later, why would he need to go to so much trouble? Those old remnants and nobles who wandered around the capital all day, thinking about restoring the old dynasty, as well as those talents who immigrated overseas and, in their old age, could casually donate their lifelong collections to local museums. Which of them doesn't have a huge fortune and countless good things now? Rather than losing them in the war years, it would be better to be straightforward and let Liang Yue guide them to heaven early. using them as action funds after exchanging for a body full of silver dollars from the gold and silver shop. Liang Yue, at the recommendation of a shop assistant, came to the facade of a wealthy family in Beeping City. He cleanly purchased 2 courtyards, one large and one small, from the other party. The large one, it was said, was originally the private residence of a high-ranking official in the court. After the Qing Emperor announced his abdication, the head of the family had already immigrated abroad. It could be considered that he had escaped a disaster in advance. The small one was also an elegant 3-section courtyard, exquisite, hidden, and winding, said to be a place where a certain nobleman kept his mistress. The reason why Liang Yue bought such an extra courtyard was simply because this courtyard was not far from the large courtyard in front, and one side of the wall was adjacent to Commercial Street. Ling. This month's routine lottery permission has been updated. Does the host want to conduct a lottery immediately? After a flurry of activity, time unknowingly came to the evening. The previous owner of the mansion had only been abroad for a few years, and the person in charge of helping with the sale usually maintained this courtyard, so the mansion in front of him could not be considered dilapidated. However, the lack of popularity for a long time made it more or less feel a bit desolate, coupled with the need to repurchase some furniture and the like. Bathed in the afterglow of the setting sun, being in it, Liang Yue suddenly experienced a sense of loneliness as if he was in a deep old mansion. Start the lottery. Gently leaning against a pillar in front of the main hall, as Liang Yue's voice fell, a familiar large turntable appeared in front of him. Stop. Ling. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill gun kata in this routine lottery. This skill comes from a certain science fiction game world and is suitable for any medium and short-range firearm combat. As the lottery result was generated, the large turntable disappeared, leaving only a skill icon composed of a pair of dual pistols. Then, this skill turned into a stream of light and flashed into Liang Yue's brow in an instant. The next moment, a stream of information surged out and rushed into his mind in an instant. For a time, all kinds of firearm knowledge began to appear in his mind, accompanied by segments of hallucination-like content and pictures. It took a full quarter of an hour before Liang Yue completely received this knowledge. Gun kata, a practical combat technique using various firearms as weapons, combined with traditional fighting techniques. The power depends on the firearm category and skill level, and is suitable for medium and short-range combat mode. Skill level 15. Current level 115. Proficiency 0-1000. Energy consumption 0-135-10. Skill effect, bullet attack power plus 10%, shooting accuracy plus 10%, shooting speed plus 15% PS. The skill can be activated by using ordinary bullets when shooting, and there is no consumption during the use process. It can also be converted into solid bullets by consuming the energy in the body. The greater the power of the bullet, the more energy is required. First stage reward, level 5, bullet power doubles. Second stage reward, level 10, armor piercing. Third stage reward, level 15, random attribute energy granted. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 506. Dragon Group. After the lottery draw ended, Liang Yue couldn't wait to start familiarizing himself with the contents of this gun kata. Similar to the soaring dragon palm from before, gun kata, as a skill, manifested on him, passively granting him benefits and corresponding buff bonuses. But the real essence lay in the knowledge and information stream that came with the skill. Therefore, to fully master this skill, he would inevitably have to spend a lot of time and energy. Fortunately, the duration of this trial was as long as 30 years. Moreover, the era he was in was one of turmoil and war, giving Liang Yue plenty of room to achieve this goal, thanks to several gun-related skills he had acquired in previous All Heavens trials, such as advanced marksmanship, ricochet, and gun modification. Liang Yue had some experience in using modern weapons like guns. Therefore, facing the knowledge and skills that came with gun kata, he quickly completed the connection between the two and tried to rehearse the skill in his mind. Unknowingly, time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sunset had fallen, and the sky gradually darkened. Yet, Liang Yue was still immersed in the sea of knowledge in his mind, unable to extricate himself until a familiar beep-beep sound interrupted his meditation, pulling him out of his original state. Subconsciously, he summoned the system screen. A glance revealed it was a video communication request from teacher Jingxiang. Subsequently, Liang Yue didn't think much about it. He directly ordered the system to arrange appropriate identities and backgrounds for the women, and then opened the space channel to let them come over, similar to his situation. When he went through the All Heavens trials with him, the system would arrange identities for Liang Yue's villagers for free if he was not satisfied. He could also spend points to modify them. However, the current All Heavens trial world was unlikely to become Liang Yue and the women's permanent residence, like the public world. Therefore, identities were just shells unless they involved abnormal powers such as bloodlines. Their significance was not great. In just one afternoon, Liang Yue had already solved the housing and activity funding problems for his family. Only a few seconds after the order was issued, a flash of light suddenly appeared under the eaves beside Liang Yue, opening a space channel. The next moment, figures who had only been separated from him for a short time walked out, impatiently judging from their appearance and attire. The system's arrangement this time was reliable. At this time, the women were all wearing Taoist robes, and their identities were naturally self-evident. They were all Taoists. After a brief exchange, Liang Yue learned that not only their identities and backgrounds, but also their specific affiliations were all female cultivators under his leadership as the abbot. A moment later, a lava stove was placed in the courtyard, and the originally dark courtyard finally had light. Everyone sat together, and under Liang Yue's introduction, began to learn about the specific information of this All Heavens world. Is this place still in the World War I period? 1915, Europe is indeed at war, but this is a rare period of recuperation for our Eastern world. I heard that although China has developed to some extent during this period, it is actually not peaceful. The warlords are divided, the North and the South are opposed, some people want to become emperors. Some people want republic, and the Japanese are also accumulating strength. If I remember correctly, that president will proclaim himself emperor at the end of this year, but he will soon be driven off the stage, and then there will be a warlord melee, and the situation in China will be even more chaotic. As for Japan, it will probably launch a war in another 20 years, right? That's just the war on the surface. The infiltration behavior in the dark has never stopped. Yes, at this stage, Japan has already begun large-scale immigration to Korea and northeast China, and small-scale troops have begun to be stationed everywhere. The plunder of economy and resources is the focus. So, Liang Yue, what are you going to do? First, get rid of some traitors and collaborators, eliminate some Japanese lackeys and troops on a small scale, and try to participate less in domestic political activities, eh? Is that all? I thought Liang Yue would directly rush to the Japanese mainland and massacre them. I'll go sooner or later, but there's no need for it yet. At this stage, China is undergoing a national ideological transformation and awakening, which is crucial for future development. A slightly worse external environment is conducive to the unity of the people. I don't intend to artificially destroy this process, but in this way, many people may die. I know, but there's no way. The rebound of national fortune requires such a process. Then will Chunqiu focus its business on Europe next? No, I plan to travel around the world and experience more people and things. What about the system tasks? Did Chunqiu say that the plot points at this stage will gather on a demigod named Diana? This is the more strange part of this trial. The system has not issued any tasks about her. Then what are your tasks this time? There are two. One is about cultivation, which I need to complete myself. The second task is a bit abstract, requiring me to protect China. I think the focus of this task should be to ensure the healthy and stable development of the domestic political situation, but the historical trend will almost certainly be civil strife. Fortunately, this task has a buffer period of 30 years, so we can take our time. Then Liang Yue, do you have any short-term plans? Anything we can help with him? I just drew a skill called gun kata. Now I'll share it with you, and then use it to branch out and organize a force. Gun kata? Do you mean we are going to form a sect again? Something like that, but the organization should be more rigorous, including the selection and apprenticeship standards, the division of teaching levels, and the rules and regulations for eliminating spies and infiltrators in general. We need to create a sufficiently resilient elite combat unit that can carry out decapitation operations against the enemy. In addition to gun kata, we can also teach some other things, for example, internal energy cultivation methods, national arts, and even ancient martial arts. Isn't this just building a special agent organization? You could say that. Then what do you plan to name this organization? Name, let's call it Dragon Group. Chapter 507, Peking City at Night. After agreeing on the general plan for the next steps, Liang Yue didn't waste any time. With a flip of his sleeve, he took out a portable panoramic sand table and began to examine the situation within a 300-mile radius of their location with the women around him. With a burst of light and shadow, In just a few seconds, the entire city of Beeping and its surrounding area were displayed on this virtual sand table. As this was a trial that would last for 30 years, Liang Yue didn't necessarily need to rush into anything. According to him, he should have stayed in Beeping for 10 days to half a month to familiarize himself with the surroundings. However, this was the first time the women had officially come with him on a trial, and their excitement was at its peak. So he could only be pushed forward by them. The city of Beeping on the panoramic sand table was now shrouded in a layer of silver light, adding an air of gentleness and romance, making it exceptionally enchanting in this era. The city was full of classical buildings. Whether they were old and weathered, classic, or trendy, they all appeared particularly quiet and harmonious in the night overlooking this metropolis that had experienced both hardship and prosperity. Even Yang Yue, and the others who had been excitedly chattering beside him, unconsciously quieted down, silently observing the people and events here. They were silently intoxicated and awed by the magnificence and subtle beauty of this ancient capital. Liang Yue, too, was observing the city from a god's eye view for the first time. Although he had been to Beeping many times in previous trials, Liang Yue didn't have the current conditions or the current state of mind back then. Invisibly, Liang Yue seemed to have gained something in his heart, something he couldn't quite explain. It seemed to be an inexplicable emotion, like some unfounded sighs and regrets. His mind was filled with ups and downs, tides rising and falling, yet he couldn't express it at all. After a long while, he gradually emerged from this state. He slowly began to regain himself, and then carefully observed this ancient capital. At this time, this world was in the autumn harvest season. Even under the silver nighttime coating of the sand table, it couldn't hide the busyness of the streets and the enthusiasm between the people coming and going. Carriages, ox carts, rickshaws, and the like were constantly pulling grain to shops, granaries, and other places in every corner of the capital. Even though it was already nightfall and the weather was getting cooler, people were still busy like a colony of ants, coming and going in an endless stream, with dust flying everywhere and sweat pouring down their backs on a few brightly lit streets. Some upper-class people, either dressed in gorgeous clothes or suits, were moving in groups of 3 or 5 between the brothels through the gaps in the window lattices and eaves. All kinds of sentimental people from unknown places were busy raising their glasses and seeking pleasure at the banquets inside a teaching building that was clearly a school. A group of students were holding books and arguing fiercely and enthusiastically by candlelight inside the imperial palace. The Forbidden City was now a desolate sight, once filled with gold and priceless treasures. After nightfall, it was even darker, and only the occasional patrolling eunuchs carrying lanterns would bring a few long-lost glimmers of light to the corridors. Unlike the cold and desolate scenes in those former aristocratic families, there was a bustling scene not far from the Forbidden City. The various pedestrians on the streets were all dressed in decent Chinese clothes and suits, a mix of Chinese and Western styles, singing and dancing in peace. Upon closer inspection, Liang Yue could vaguely recognize that it seemed to be a gathering place not far from the embassies of various countries. "Hey, Chunkyu, look, there are a few people lying on the roof over there, and they don't seem to be far from us at this moment." Hinata was focusing her attention on the area near their residence. When she saw a few sneaky figures, a look of excitement immediately appeared on her small face. Hearing this, everyone's eyes subconsciously focused over, and they quickly locked onto the few gray shadows. It had to be said that with the cover of night, although these ill-intentioned people were moving quickly and were agile, they could easily be overlooked under the cover of clothing and trees. Even though the sand table was covered with a layer of night light, there weren't many of these people, only 5 in total, but judging from their movements and subconscious habits, they all seemed to be experienced. Their cooperation was orderly, and their advances and retreats were skillful. More importantly, one of them had a katana on his back. Looking at their direction of movement, "These people are coming for us, right?" Takagi Saya said with her arms folded and a look of surprise on her face, and then she didn't forget to glance at Liang Yue. Judging from the sand table, the movement route of these 5 people seemed to be very purposeful. According to their current direction, they would at least pass by their courtyard in a few tens of seconds and then land and enter a nearby commercial district. This was obviously a bit unreasonable. If they just wanted to go shopping, why would they have to climb over the wall now? But the problem was that Liang Yue had only just arrived in Beeping today. Hinata and Siko had only arrived less than an hour ago. They hadn't offended anyone or provoked anyone. Japanese? Could it be the woman on the bus during the day? Looking at the figures on the sand table, whose style of behavior looked more and more like a low-profile version of ninjas, Liang Yue couldn't help but mutter to himself in surprise. "So, you've only been here for half a day, and you've already offended a Japanese woman, eh, Koldor? Is it a special kind of energy?" Siko also looked over curiously upon hearing this. "Well, The feeling it gives people is as if they've lived in a graveyard for a long time and grown up eating dead people's flesh. Liang Yue thought about it carefully and described it in his own understanding: necromantic power. It's a pity that none of us have been transferred into necromancers. Hearing his words, Shizuka-sensei touched her chin and frowned slightly. Why bother with that much trouble? It would be good to just catch them and interrogate them. Xiaozhia rolled her eyes and said with a smile. Upon hearing this, before she could finish speaking, Nana had already eagerly flown onto the roof, turning into a gray shadow and quietly heading in the direction the 5 people were coming from on the other side. The elf princess Arwen also silently climbed a large tree in the yard, knocked an arrow, aimed at the dark direction, and was ready to provide support and coordination at any time. Chapter 508 China-Japan Supernatural Exchange Competition? Sino-Japanese Supernatural Power Exchange Competition. Is it a competition and showdown specifically for people with supernatural powers? There's actually a competition like that? I've never heard of it before. After all, the world is different now. It's normal not to have heard of it. Besides, given our state in the previous world, even if it really existed, it would only be spread within a small circle. So, these guys sneaking into our house tonight were trying to eliminate some competitors before the competition. HMPH, better to kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go? That's really their style. We have to teach them a lesson. By the way, is this supernatural power competition mainly about fighting ability between 2 countries? If it's not about fighting ability, are we supposed to sit down and have a war of words? Are we going to participate too? I don't think it's necessary. Anyway, as long as Liang Yue goes on stage in the end, he'll be the one winning. I don't think there's anyone stronger than him in this version of Japan. Of course, gods, or rather, those aliens, are an exception. Chunchu will definitely sign up to participate, right? Of course. It's a good opportunity to see what level the supernatural beings hidden in normal human society are in this world. In that case, those island nation ninjas who originally planned to attack at night unexpectedly brought Liang Yue and the others a very valuable piece of information. That is, recently, the ambitious Yuan Shikai, before ascending the throne, will hold a grand competition involving supernatural beings between China and Japan. The reason is not clear, but according to the ninja's private speculation, this should be because Yuan Datao is dissatisfied with the Japanese side's excessive interference in Chinese internal affairs, but can't come up with any effective solutions for the time being, having nowhere to vent. He has no choice but to start from the mysterious side that is not familiar to the public, and attempt to suppress the island nation with the domestic elite supernatural beings. Based on this consideration, the response from the island nation side is also very strong. Directly led by their emperor, it is said that they have gathered strong individuals from various schools and regions within the island, adhering to their consistent style of getting a hot head and wanting to bet all their wealth and go all in. They are preparing to have a face-to-face life and death struggle with the Chinese side. As a country that is in a period of rising national fortune and has achieved almost complete unity from top to bottom, Liang Yue can actually understand their feelings not only in the strength of the secular army, but even in terms of supernatural beings. They also want to overwhelm China. Only in this way can they prove that they are the representative of East Asia, the #1 role among yellow people, and then sweep away the decline of being repeatedly crushed and beaten by China in the long river of past history. It has to be said that this is almost the only opportunity that the development of human history has given to the island nation to surpass China. Therefore, since he has come to this world, Liang Yue feels that it is very necessary to press them back down, and in order to prepare for this exchange conference for supernatural beings, the island nation has also done enough homework from pre-event investigations, verification and evaluation of strong individuals and sects in various regions of China, to comparisons with their own personnel in terms of strength, the order of duels during the exchange meeting, etc. Even, like now, sending people over at night to solve and advance some unknown forces, such as Liang Yue, who are unknown and have not been properly investigated beforehand. For this reason, the island nation has secretly used all kinds of schemes, conspiracies, open and secret fights, all kinds of dirty tricks, using all means to the extreme. It is a pity that the 5 ninjas who came to investigate and assassinate Liang Yue at this time are just tools responsible for implementing the cleaning operation, and they know limited information. In addition to the triggering event of a supernatural power exchange meeting, it cannot provide him with too much useful information. Therefore, after wringing out a little bit of dry goods from these people, they were directly had their necks twisted by Liang Yue and randomly thrown into a magma lake in the stronghold world. So, is this matter going to end here? Are you planning to get revenge on the stage of that exchange meeting? While speaking, at some point, Nali Xiang beside her had silently taken out her pair of infinite ammunition penetrators, took out a piece of deerskin from her hand, and wiped it on the gun body where she could not see a trace of dust, using practical actions to express her attitude at this moment. Seeing this, Liang Yue immediately curled the corner of his mouth, swept his gaze across the faces of the women beside him, and found that at this moment, they were mostly looking eager to try. It is impolite not to reciprocate. We should indeed come up with a response. The 5 island nation ninjas before were indeed just emotionless killing tools and didn't know much information. However, as a member of the island nation who has been stationed in the secret front line of the Chinese capital for a long time, their existence itself is actually a kind of intelligence and has a considerable degree of reference value, including but not limited to their daily life, activity range, duty location, and even all contact groups, partners from other fronts within the island nation, etc. For Liang Yue, these are actually quite useful information upon closer inspection. Just these things are enough for him to be busy for a while, regardless of whether it is related to this exchange meeting for supernatural beings. All the forces under the island nation can be used as targets for revenge, and it is definitely not wrong. Now, the women around Liang Yue want to help him share the burden on his shoulders, and he is naturally eager to do so. In addition, through the matter in front of him, Liang Yue can also vaguely feel that this is actually Nali Xiang, the Gao Chang mother and daughter, senior sister Yazi, and others expressing their attitude to him, expressing a clear attitude to himself with their respective practical actions. That is, no matter where their previous countries and nations belonged, they now belong only to Liang Yue. At this moment, no one said much anymore, but a silent understanding had quietly built up in everyone's hearts. In the end, after a simple round of discussion, Liang Yue and others had already drafted the battle plan for tonight. Alvin and Hinata, who didn't have a strong desire to travel, were left behind to be responsible for guarding the house. The rest were at least assigned to an island nation stronghold for targeted retaliation, including various large-scale shops, warehouses, restaurants, investors, and elite combat forces that have a quietly stationed in secret, etc. Of course, the combat power mentioned here only refers to those ordinary personnel who have received military training, special agents, intelligence workers, etc., at most reaching the level of those clumsy ninjas before. It does not include the various supernatural beings gathered by their emperors. Chapter 509 Magma Explosion. A moment later, the women who had received their assignments left in groups of 2 or 3. Some, like ordinary people, simply cast a transformation spell on themselves and walked out of the courtyard together, pushing open the gate. Others used skills to make themselves invisible, flew onto the roof, and disappeared into the darkness in the blink of an eye. Judging by their techniques and speed of action, they were definitely more professional than those few ninjas from before. As for Liang Yue, because of the women's picking and choosing, the task he was finally assigned was just a large warehouse located on the southern edge of Beeping City, at the foot of the old city wall. Not only was it far from his own residence, but it was also isolated, with no neighboring island nation forces nearby. It was the kind of standard, unchallenging target location that others had left behind, unwanted according to the intelligence left by those ninjas. Although this warehouse outwardly claimed to store grain, rice, oil, medicinal herbs, and aquatic products, etc., the reality was that it was a place where the Japanese were responsible for storing opium, with enough drugs stored inside to supply all the opium addicts in Beeping City for a full 3 years. At the same time, it was also one of the important transit stations used by the Japanese to transfer opium to the central plains of China, while also collecting various intelligence. In fact, when it comes to opium, those Western powers such as Britain and the United States no longer engaged in this kind of business much in this era, not because of any newfound conscience, but because the profit margin was too low. Around the middle of the last century, opium was officially recognized by the Qing dynasty and allowed to be planted on Chinese soil. As a result, in just a decade or two, the related production and extraction technology of this stuff in China had caught up with the international level. Not only did it basically achieve self-sufficiency, but it could also be exported by some merchants to Southeast Asia and other places to earn silver foreign exchange. From that time on, it was basically impossible for Britain, the United States, and other countries to sell opium to China. After all, the profit had become too low, and as ocean freight, it was also very uneconomical from a commercial point of view. But Japan was an exception. Although they knew that selling opium to China wouldn't earn them much money, they never stopped importing it into this land. They would even directly contract land in China to plant related crops, which would then be made into opium for sale. Then, they didn't forget to actively innovate, constantly developing various new types of opium products, such as high-purity injections, etc. So, obviously, what they wanted was not just simple economic benefits, but to use the power of drugs to further weaken and even disintegrate the will of the Chinese people. Liang Yue naturally had nothing to say about these bad people. He had to beat them to death. It would be best to stomp them to death and erase them from the earth. However, now was not the time yet, because at this time, China was weak and unable to recover, and the whole country was filled with a decadent atmosphere. To be reborn from the ashes, it needed to go through the experience of blood and fire. For this, even if more sacrifices were made, it would be worth it. Liang Yue naturally couldn't artificially interrupt this process. He could only wait silently by the side, using his own methods to urge and speed up the rate, and prevent anyone from coming out to sabotage it. Once the time was ripe, he would send the final salute to that island nation. After seeing off the excited women, Liang Yue didn't rush to leave. Instead, he stood still, one hand on his hip and the other looking down, trimming his nails. After pondering for a while, he finally looked up at Alwyn and Hinata opposite him and smiled. He said calmly, "I'm leaving." After saying that, his entire figure began to blur. Squeak squeak. Just then, little King Kong, who had been lying in Hinata's arms, suddenly jumped out, leaped gently, and came to his shoulder, eventually disappearing with Liang Yue into the surrounding dim night. "Did you feel it just now?" "Yes, Chunky." He seems very excited, but at the same time, there is also a hint of anger mixed in his heart. But he is trying very hard to suppress it and not show it. That should be an emotion derived from hatred. After returning to the base world with Chunky, I have been reading about their country's history. I think his emotions should be derived from this. Yes, so he should also value the experience in this world in front of him, right? Help? This is something I can solve with one skill. Why would I need you to take action? Squeak. Alright, then just follow me and watch from the side. It's not time for you to expose yourself yet. After using his phasing ability to teleport, Liang Yue, carrying little King Kong, had almost instantly arrived from his home near the inner city wall to the foot of the wall outside Beeping's outer city. At this time, he was silently floating above the target warehouse. What supported Liang Yue's stay in the air was not the spiritual power in his body, but the gravitational control from his bloodline. Therefore, Liang Yue's whole body did not have the slightest hint of worldly aura or energy reaction. At this moment, the dark Saiyan Taoist robe set him off like a ghost, making him almost perfectly integrated into the night. Only a fair face with a hint of hazy reflection under the moonlight. The scale of the warehouse below was very large, with more than 20 acres, and the area was even larger than the sum of the two residences Liang Yue had just bought during the day. In addition to the warehouses for storing goods, there were also complete employee dormitory areas, cafeterias, office spaces, recreational courtyards, and even bathhouses. The time was already past 9 p.m. after nightfall. In the near-modern society lacking entertainment, most of the people below had already fallen asleep. Even in mid-air, Liang Yue could vaguely hear the sound of snoring from those rooms, but in some hidden corners, he also found many sentry posts, responsible for preventing any possible threats for a group of people who, for some reason, had long been accustomed to peace and quiet and rarely encountered any trouble. This was indeed a commendable discipline. Today, they were just like usual, habitually following the previous rules and methods, continuing their day-to-day rhythm of life. However, in the next moment, a sudden and violent tremor disrupted the peace and harmony here. Rumble. In an instant, the earth shook, the houses trembled. The flowers, plants, and trees in the courtyard shook violently, and large patches of dust began to fall from the corners of the walls and the roof beams. Various flower pots, tiles, goods, wooden racks immediately crashed to the ground with clanging sounds. As a member born on the island nation, the guards in the warehouse should have been accustomed to this sudden natural disaster. While it wasn't an everyday occurrence, some emergency measures should have been ingrained in their bones. But if the process of this disaster was artificially accelerated by dozens of times, and the destructive effect also increased exponentially, then even the best coping strategy would be difficult to achieve its ideal preventive effect. Crack. Accompanied by a muffled cracking sound. Almost in an instant, a deep crack spread to the entire warehouse. At the same time, on the originally solid and thick ground, there suddenly appeared gaps like centipede claws, dense and abnormally hideous. In the depths of the cracks, patches of hot lava were emitting a terrifying red light accompanied by bursts of gurgling bubble bursts. A strong suffocating sulfurous smell began to spread throughout the area. Chapter 510. Lava Fountain. Earthquake. Earthquakes here. Help me, save me, Mom, Mommy, idiot, shut up, Taro, bastard, shut your mouth, Taro, don't panic. Stay calm, don't panic, stay calm. To the corner of the wall. Quickly, get to the corner of the wall. Quick, did you learn from dogs? Follow the usual training. Quickly, did you all learn from dogs? Follow the usual training. Hurry. It must be said that although the people below seemed a little flustered at the first moment of the earthquake, they had experienced many such situations after all. The living environment in island countries, with small earthquakes every 3 days and large earthquakes every 5 days, really trains people. In just a few seconds, the crowd below was organized in a relatively orderly manner. One by one, they hugged their heads, wearing loincloths, and squatted in the corners of the wall. However, how could this strategy, which can only be used to deal with ordinary small earthquakes, withstand the ravages of Liang Yue's skills? The earthquake is actually just its prelude, just an opening overture brought by the skill. The real damage has just begun. Crack, only to see a short cracking sound, and suddenly, twisted cracks appeared on the ground of the dormitory below. The orange-red light instantly dyed the entire room red, and the temperature in the air rose sharply in an instant. Boom, boom, boom. And scenes like this were everywhere within the entire warehouse at this moment, even though sentries responsible for guarding the periphery of the warehouse were taken special care of by Liang Yue and were ignited by the magma and roasted into coke in the first instant. In this process, opium, intelligence, and living materials were all submerged in the turbulent waves of the magma lake in the blink of an eye. Oh, there's actually a batch of antiques hidden over there. Just as Liang Yue was scanning the warehouse below through the vision of the Tensigan, looking for survivors who were almost impossible to find, he was also a little surprised to find a batch of reinforced wooden boxes piled up in the corner on the second floor of a stone warehouse. Inside, buried under thick straw and padding, were exquisite jade carvings, porcelains, and even bronze objects of various shapes. When Liang Yue saw this, he immediately understood that these were good things that the little devils had plundered from all over China. So, he hurriedly snatched the pile of antique objects, as well as a few boxes of gold, silver, and dollars next to them, into the base world before the magma burned through the walls of the second floor. Speaking of which, the volcano burst skill undoubtedly comes from the Druid, one of the 7 major classes in Diablo 2 after Liang Yue's job change. However, unlike in the game, after clearing the nightmare difficulty dungeon, the system has helped him complete the transformation from a game profession to a real-world profession. Therefore, the current manifestation of this skill is already quite different from that in the game. The original fixed release range seems to have been unrestricted after the real-world transformation. Theoretically speaking, as long as enough mana is consumed, the coverage area of the volcano burst skill will also increase. Moreover, because the skill was used relatively frequently in the dungeon, Liang Yue's mastery of volcano burst has reached a certain level, and even the shape of the skill release can be controlled. The warehouse in front of him is his masterpiece. Although the volcanic fissure has extended to the entire warehouse, it has hardly affected the surrounding residents and businesses. In addition, the little devils attach great importance to this warehouse, and even the closest buildings in the surrounding area are separated from it by the width of a street. Therefore, apart from a few handfuls of dust that were shaken off during the initial earthquake that needed to be cleaned, there was almost no damage to the surrounding area. After solving the warehouse, Liang Yue did not continue to stay. With a flicker, he disappeared into the air at the same time, when he finished a battle here and was rushing to the next battlefield to check the battle situation and planned to secretly escort the girls. The targets that the others went to did not last long under their strong offensive. With a burst of skills and the suppression of air transcending firepower, they quickly resolved the battle in a few strokes. First, this was due to the surprise attack with the enemy in the open and us in the dark, and with careful calculations, they already had the advantage of taking the first move. Furthermore, the strengths of the two sides in the battle were not equal. Liang Yue's girls are a super combat force with multiple blessings from martial artists, mages, ninjas, professionals, and modern weapons. In terms of actual combat, they also have dungeons of various difficulties as a platform for drills and run-ins, and their combat power is naturally off the charts. And the group of people they attacked were just some ordinary people under the rule of the island country at most. There were a few agents who mainly collected intelligence and had received a few years of professional training, as well as clumsy low-level ninjas. The combat power on both sides was not equal, so naturally there would be no accidents. Well, after just floating in the sky for a while, and finding that there was really nothing he could do, Liang Yue once again made a flicker and returned directly to his own mansion. Speaking of which, although he had only come to this plane not long ago, in Liang Yue's mind, the current DC world, whether in terms of power level or rule system, is actually at almost the same level as the Marvel Comprehensive World. In reality, they both belong to the kind where the rules of heaven and earth are unusually active and casual, almost plainly placed in front of practitioners, waiting for those who are destined to comprehend them. Not only is his own ability not restricted in the slightest, but being in such a world is like being in a natural testing ground. As long as the practitioner's own realm has arrived, and the accumulation of knowledge reserves has reached a certain level, they can naturally comprehend the target rules they want. Moreover, as long as they obtain the usage rights of some experimental equipment, they can freely manipulate these rules themselves, and use them to arbitrarily create things, create people, restart, and even create more universes. In terms of resources, there is also an almost unlimited supply. Being in such a world is an opportunity to more easily understand the mysteries of heaven and earth, and it is also a challenge. If you are not careful, you may be implicated and die for no reason because a big shot casually fiddles with the equipment. Fortunately, the time period that Liang Yue is currently in should be relatively safe. After all, a large number of established plots have not yet been opened, and even Superman has not yet come to Earth. In this case, he is unlikely to catch up with such a sudden event. Chapter 511 Asymmetric Warfare. With only 2 or 3 minutes between departing and returning, Liang Yue was back home with little Kong. Alvin and Hinata were still sitting by the lava stove, observing the situation in the city through the holographic sand table. At this moment, from the God's Eye view provided by the sand table, it could be seen that the ladies scattered throughout Beeping had mostly completed their respective cleanup work, resolving the necessary battles. Subsequently, they were quickly disappearing into the night with their abundant gains. Liang Yue personally witnessed Nana and Non-Lixiang unscrupulously ransacking the warehouse of a Japanese trading house for various gold, silver, and heavy metals before leaving. Their figures were agile and their cooperation was seamless. However, compared to Liang Yue's method of directly flooding the entire warehouse with lava, the ladies' style was relatively civilized. They only resolved some of the guards, ransacked for a while, and then began to retreat, without causing much commotion in the city. In some of the island nations' more loosely guarded strongholds, there wasn't even the slightest unusual sound from beginning to end. They quietly took action, and then quietly left after it was all over. The surrounding people didn't notice anything unusual at all compared to their sudden attack. The island nation, as the recipient, seemed much more immature, completely unprepared throughout the entire process, like dead fish left on the chopping board. They were at their mercy. No wonder these little devils like to play the game of sudden attacks and undeclared wars on the battlefield. The risk is low, and the gains are simply too great. Soon, in just 7 or 8 minutes, the women who had originally gone to various parts of Beeping City, even the slowest ones, had returned with excitement on their faces. They shared and displayed their gains from this trip with the others. As for the merchants and stores who were the victims of the smashing and looting, the island nation's forces behind them took more than an hour to react to the series of bad news. Frankly speaking, this information transmission efficiency was already quite good. Feeling unwilling, their diplomatic mission stationed in Beeping City even sent an ambassador overnight, rushing to the presidential palace to protest to Yuan Datao. But Yuan Datao himself was obviously a bit confused about this matter. In just one night, the island nation's various warehouses, merchants, foreign firms, and even some secret underground strongholds in Beeping City were directly wiped out. Ordinary people simply couldn't do this kind of thing, but he didn't do it either. So, feeling somewhat inexplicably confused, and also somewhat inexplicably happy, Yuan Datao had to persuade the Japanese ambassador with kind words. He said that he would definitely instruct his subordinates to carefully investigate the matter tomorrow. After that, he drove out the ambassador, who disturbed his rest. The ambassador himself obviously knew that this was just Yuan Datao's excuse to him at this time. The island nation, because of the victory in the Russo-Japanese War, had greatly boosted its international prestige, but its own strength was still somewhat insufficient. Although the entire island nation had exhausted all its efforts, united as one, striving for progress, and working hard to seek development, it would still need at least 20 more years to prepare for launching a war of aggression against China. At this moment, they temporarily didn't have the confidence to rashly adopt a tough stance towards Yuan Datao and release some substantial threats. Therefore, without any conclusive evidence, the losses that his side suffered in Beeping City tonight would most likely not be recovered naturally. The Japanese ambassador was extremely angry about this, and the flames of hatred in his heart began to burn uncontrollably. After leaving the presidential palace, he rushed almost immediately to a large mansion in a corner of the outer city. At this time, those Japanese elite Esper personnel who had been summoned by the Japanese emperor himself were stationed here. Needless to say, the ambassador's purpose here was naturally to discuss countermeasures with this group of people and how to retaliate against China afterward. Time quickly came to the next morning. After a night of fermentation, With a rapid spread of people from all walks of life, as of now, more than half of the people in Beeping City already knew about the attack on the island nation's merchants, material warehouses, and other places last night in particular. The large warehouse located outside the south wall was actually submerged by a small earthquake and lava eruption. What's even more peculiar is that the surrounding residents and people were not greatly affected by this in people's eyes. This was simply a miracle. Therefore, for a time, the matter of the Eastern Ocean little devils encountering divine punishment quickly began to spread like wildfire throughout the city. In addition, with the implementation of Yuan Datao's instructions, various government troops and police stations began to go to the scene to investigate, and a group of idle people also followed to watch. Within a short day, the public opinion began to ferment rapidly, and some newspapers also closely followed the current events, taking this as the front page headline. With the voices rising higher and higher, they left a little earlier than him. The registration location for the exchange meeting was not located in Beeping City, but in a famous Buddhist temple outside the city. As for why this voluntary registration and participation method was adopted, this is probably because even Yuan Datao himself may not be clear about how much appeal he has in the eyes of those Esper personnel and transcendent masters. What if, when the competition is approaching, after he issues an administrative order, none of the capable ones come? That would be too embarrassing. So, for the sake of prudence, old Yuan had to make two preparations in advance. On the surface, he voluntarily registered to participate, and a large number of scattered cultivators from the people were selected. Then, the elite among them were selected to serve as the main force and cannon fodder for this exchange meeting. The land of China is vast and rich in resources, and there are many outstanding people. There will always be some strange people and strangers who can't stand the loneliness. After learning their skills, they want to make a name and career in this mundane world. At that time, the official level will naturally give the deserved treatment to those real masters among this group of people, and then take the opportunity to recruit them. As for those famous sects that are already well known and have a long tradition, administrative orders must still be issued to summon their elite personnel to respond. It's best if they can come at that time, regardless of whether they win or lose. Datao will of course not hesitate to bestow rewards. It doesn't matter if they don't come, at least he can make him recognize each other, and then find time to clean them up in the future. Chapter 512. Born different, acquired different. Before him, Liang Yue, as one of the volunteers, didn't arrive particularly early at this moment. The registration site wasn't exactly overflowing with people, but there were still 50 or 60 individuals present. Furthermore, it wasn't the first day of registration. This Temple Gate area had been serving as a gathering point for the past few days. Thus, the lively atmosphere of the scene was evident. After arriving, Liang Yue didn't rush to join the queue but stood aside to observe for a moment. After observing for about 10 minutes, he discovered that at least half of the people present were just charlatans. Their skill level was basically only slightly better than those who performed on the streets, crushing stones on their chest, piercing their throats with spear tips, breathing fire, twirling whips, standing still while soldiers hit them with wooden sticks. Reportedly, the community of experts in China is roughly divided into two categories: innate experts and acquired cultivators. In terms of setting, it was somewhat similar to an anime he had watched in his previous life. However, Liang Yue wasn't yet sure if the specific people and events involved were from that particular anime. As the name suggests, innate experts are a group of people who spontaneously awaken special abilities during their growth, and they are mostly skilled in natural techniques such as controlling fire, water, wind, and so on. Acquired experts, on the other hand, are a group of people who achieve inner sublimation through acquired cultivation, thereby mastering extraordinary skills. The representative figures among them include the various famous sects and families that have been passed down through the ages in China. Various martial arts schools and esoteric Taoist methods mostly originate from this. Strictly speaking, Liang Yue has something to do with both, because he has never given up on either special abilities or cultivation. After watching from the sidelines for a while, Liang Yue felt that he had gained some understanding of the situation, so he didn't delay any longer and directly found a less crowded registration point. Register, file, and then undergo inspection. What's your name? And where are you from? The person in charge of writing seemed to be a young military officer, his uniform crisp and neat, his cap straight, and his spirit very vigorous. Although he wasn't wearing any insignia, he seemed to have some background. My name is Liang Yue. I have been cultivating in the mountains. This is my Taoist certificate. As in the previous public world, the Taoist certificate was prepared by the system. It was a legal identity recognized by both the world and the authorities, and there would be no problem no matter who checked it. Oh, so you're actually a Taoist abbot? You don't look very old. The Taoist certificate is fine, but I've never heard of the Flowing Cloud sect. It's a small sect. It's normal that you haven't heard of it. We've always practiced in seclusion, and it's passed down through a single line. After my master passed away, the inheritance fell to me. And what can you do? Are you an innate expert, or do you practice the inheritance of your own sect? I'm both an expert and have an inheritance. I know a little bit of Taoism, martial arts, and weapons. Oh? You're quite confident. I wouldn't dare to hide anything. HMPH. How far have you cultivated? Forget it, I won't ask you about your specific realm. Just tell me one thing. Can you stop a bullet? I can stop it, really, of course. If I didn't have some ability, I wouldn't dare to come here to show off. Then would you dare to let me try? As he said that, the officer opposite him stood up from his seat with a whoosh, deftly pulled out a pistol from his waist, and then deliberately slowed down his movements. He looked at him with a half smile, as if waiting for him to go back on his word. Presumably, he had seen many Jianghu people who were full of hot air in the past few days. Please, sir. Facing the officer's doubts, Liang Yue didn't react much. After all, the current registration selection was originally for participating in the Sino-Japanese Special Abilities Exchange Conference, and it was appropriate to be strict otherwise. If a bunch of substandard people were selected to go on stage, it would be a loss of face for the entire country. Everyone present understood this principle. However, to their surprise, after the bullet left the barrel, it didn't continue forward as expected. Instead, the moment it flew out of the muzzle, it seemed to encounter an invisible transparent wall and directly hovered there behind it. The powerful thrust generated by the gunpowder explosion continued to urge the bullet forward, but the invisible wall in front seemed to be truly indestructible, and it couldn't be penetrated at all. So next, under the observation and attention of everyone around, the bullet was gradually squeezed and pushed by these two forces, eventually being compressed into a metal disc about the thickness of a dime. After exhausting its force, it directly thudded and fell onto the table covered with a layer of padding. Wow! Seeing this scene, the fellow practitioners around couldn't help but burst into an uproar. The gazes they cast at Liang Yue also unconsciously carried a hint of envy and shock. Although stopping bullets might not be something that everyone present couldn't do, but for most of the applicants who were just here to try their luck, this realm was indeed enough to make them look up to him. The young officer opposite him was obviously a knowledgeable person. After realizing that Liang Yue really had the ability, he immediately put the gun back into its holster. Then he respectfully cupped his fists, bowed, and said, "Taoist priest, please come inside. You're too kind, sir." After staying in the inner hall of the temple for about half an hour, after clarifying the competition arrangements and process of the Sino-Japanese Special Abilities Exchange Conference, Liang Yue got up and said goodbye. When he left, he naturally had an entry qualification certificate in the shape of a token in his hand. The corresponding identity information, serial number, etc., had also been recorded. As for the official date of this exchange competition, it would have to wait until early winter, more than a month later reportedly. Although this Sino-Japanese Special Abilities competition was nominally held only between the two countries, it was actually a semi-public event at that time. Although this exchange meeting would not be open to ordinary people, some high-level figures from China and Japan, foreign envoys stationed in Beijing, even some socially influential and well-connected social elites may be present to watch. In addition, the arrangement of this competition adopted a selection dual system. This means that a selection must first be conducted within one's own side, and then a draw will be held at a two-country exchange meeting. In other words, the registration and the token in hand only allowed Liang Yue to obtain an entry qualification. If he wanted to be officially confirmed as a contestant, he would have to undergo at least one selection. As for the specific time of the internal selection, he would have to wait for notification. Liang Yue had no objection to this. It's a national-level competition, so it's appropriate to be meticulous. After rejecting the official accommodation arrangements and reporting his home address, he directly bid farewell and left. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 513, Kryptonian Spaceship. After returning home, I discovered that Erwin, teacher Shizuka, and the others hadn't come back yet. It seems they got hooked on shopping, so I video called Aunt Beihezi. After the connection was successful, I found that the women were actually in a furniture city in Beeping, picking and choosing among a pile of furniture samples. It seems they planned to turn their own mansion into a Republic of China-style residence. Although Liang Yue felt that the young ladies were making unnecessary efforts, since the furniture produced in Mick was obviously of better quality, He didn't raise any objections after briefly explaining the registration for the competition to the people on the other side of the video, and telling them to pay attention to the people who would be sent by the official in the next few days to deliver the news. Liang Yue prepared to temporarily go out for a period of training. His destination this time was the distant Arctic ice field. The target he wanted to explore was the spaceship that was said to have crashed on Earth tens of thousands of years ago, during the era of Kryptonian colonization of the universe. Although in the plot, it seemed to be just a scientific expedition ship sent by Krypton, but such a cross-era technological product that can conduct interstellar voyages, and still operate normally after tens of thousands of years of erosion, is still very precious to Liang Yue now. It's simply invaluable. Currently, Liang Yue is about to spend a full 30 years in this DC world. During such a long period, he naturally has to find something for his little Wu clone in the base world to do with that spaceship. I believe that after this all heavens experience and research, the technological level of his Lao Liang family will surely usher in an unprecedented qualitative leap. After making up his mind, Liang Yue's heart was filled with uncontrollable excitement. The next moment, with a flip of his sleeve, he took out a brass-colored object from the storage space. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a sling ring. Actually, during this trip, in addition to finding the Kryptonian spaceship, Liang Yue also wanted to test whether the space portal in Marvel could be used in the current DC world in principle. There shouldn't be much of a problem after all. Based on his personal experience, the rules of heaven and earth in Marvel and DC are actually similar, even if there are some differences in the details. This magical space portal technology, passed down from the lineage of the Ancient One, is by no means an ordinary skill. It can still be used with great skill in the multiverse. What Liang Yue is worried about now is whether the spatial coordinates of various nodes on Earth will also show some kind of regular deviation with the change of the universe plane. Therefore, his goal at this time is to constantly try and restore the smoothness of the portal opening technique of Marvel Earth in the process of exploration. Buzz soon. As Liang Yue stretched forward, his two fingers wearing the sling ring in one hand, and drew circles back and forth in the air in front of him with the other, streaks of orange magic began to appear in the void immediately afterwards. After only 2 seconds, a strange snowy landscape appeared smoothly on the other side of the orange halo. Seeing this, Liang Yue squinted his eyes, carefully examined it through the light gate for a while, and finally confirmed that the area on the opposite side was indeed the destination he wanted to go to, the Arctic, because at the intersection of an ice hill and a sea, Liang Yue had clearly discovered a polar bear hunting a seal. That's right. It's a polar bear, not a penguin or anything. It seems that the difference in the spatial position of the Earth in these two universes is not very big, which is easy to handle. After drawing this conclusion, Liang Yue also relaxed, and his mood became more cheerful. After casting an invisibility spell on himself, he stepped into the space portal. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, several days have passed with the assistance of the holographic sand table. In the end, even with Liang Yue's current abilities, it still took a full week to find the spaceship from Krypton in a snowy canyon in Alaska, USA, and although the sand table can provide him with enough vision, allowing him to overlook the entire Arctic Circle from a god's perspective during this period, the real reliance that allowed Liang Yue to accurately find the main body of the spaceship was actually his pair of Rinnegan eyes, and the passive skill Eye of Truth from the Wind Phantom Dragon bloodline. Under the cover of thick snow, the ability of the holographic sand table was still somewhat lacking, although it can be used to detect various terrain contours, ground scenes, weather changes, buildings, flora and fauna, and other activities in real time. It is still powerless for those objects deeply buried under heavy cover. Therefore, after personally discovering this shortcoming, Liang Yue immediately passed his thoughts to the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, asking it to improve the function of the sand table. In this way, after wandering around in the Arctic Circle for a week, Liang Yue finally returned to his home and beeping again. Originally, after finding the Kryptonian spaceship and throwing it into the base world without hesitation, he planned to go to Europe first. At this time, the First World War was in full swing on the lands of Western Europe. The emergence of trench warfare greatly slowed down the progress of the war and expanded the losses and consumption on the battlefield. In order to win the war, both sides had to invest more troops, resources, and logistics than in previous wars in order to gain sufficient advantages on the battlefield. However, while the cruel war caused massive casualties, it also passively spawned many new technologies to adapt to the new war model. For example, tanks, radar, etc. The Mother Box, which was once dug up and buried by the human allied forces in ancient times, is Liang Yue's target. The Mother Box has an important position in the DC universe, and even compared to the Infinity Stones in the Marvel world, It seems that each has its own strengths. It's just that unlike the Infinity Stones, the function of the mother box is more complicated, and the form of existence is more abstract. Strictly speaking, the mother box is a super technological creation, and its abilities are more inclined to assistance. Its origin is a supercomputer created by a scientist from Apocalypse using the mysterious X element, with a more abstract sense of consciousness, small in size, and easy to carry. Even so, the true nature and origin of these three mother boxes are still very mysterious, and even their users, the new gods of DC, cannot understand the power and abilities that the mother boxes possess in Liang Yue's concept. If the entire DC universe can be regarded as a laboratory, then the mother box is likely to be some kind of functional instrument in the laboratory. It doesn't have too much authority in itself, but it can also compile and manipulate the creations in the laboratory to a certain extent. Liang Yue's purpose in getting the mother box is also very simple, which is to indirectly study the law composition in the DC world through this special existence. Of course, having said all that, he should still be a long way from the realm of comprehending the laws. Even if he gets this thing, he will probably only be able to stare blankly in a short time. But even so, getting the mother box in advance has almost no disadvantages for Liang Yue. The real reason that prompted him to temporarily change his mind and return to beeping was actually a message sent to him by Senior Seiko. The internal selection before the exchange meeting is about to begin. Chapter 514. Red leaves all over the mountains. Xiao Wu, how is the artificial intelligence on that spaceship? How much longer will it take to crack it? Reporting, Master, Xiao Wu estimates that it will take another week to seize the highest authority. The technological level of this artificial intelligence is actually only average. It wouldn't even be considered mainstream in Xiao Wu's era. However, its creators initially bound it tightly to the control system of the spaceship. To ensure that the AI program wouldn't self-destruct the ship in extreme circumstances, it's taking a bit longer. Taking a little more time is fine. It's better to be safe than sorry. Xiao Wu understands. As an intelligent optical brain from an advanced technological plane, Liang Yue had to expend a precious infinite lottery ticket to acquire the AI Xiao Wu. Although he wasn't entirely sure how advanced the technology in that advanced technological plane actually was, the current DC universe, a mixed bag of gods and demons, probably hadn't reached that level of advancement. At the very least, its technological level shouldn't be that high. And while Krypton was considered an advanced civilization in the DC world, its own technological level clearly hadn't exceeded a certain limit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stood by and watched their home planet wither in self-destruct, completely without a way to repair it. Therefore, almost as soon as he obtained the Kryptonian spaceship, Liang Yue ordered the intelligent brain Xiao Wu to fully crack its control system. As for whether it would succeed, he had never doubted it from beginning to end. 3 more days passed. After receiving a message from Senior Seiko that someone had delivered a letter informing him that the exchange meeting selection was about to begin, Liang Yue returned home. After carefully reading the invitation letter delivered by the messenger, he learned that the selection would take place today, and the venue would be in the mountains in the northwestern suburbs of Beeping City. It was now the season when autumn was gradually deepening, and the mountains were full of red leaves, like blood-stained flames, appearing particularly magnificent under the morning light. Occasionally, a few clusters of plants that were still slightly yellow dotted the landscape, adding to its enchanting beauty in the early morning. Shrouded in a thin layer of frost, Liang Yue walked easily, and soon after leaving the city gate, he began to use his Qinguang, flying and leaping along the way, arriving at the selection site in just a few minutes. Although he had encountered many like-minded people on the way, when he actually arrived at his destination, he found that the selection site was already bustling with activity. In order to organize this Sino-Japanese Extraordinary People Exchange Conference, Yuan Datao was sparing no expense, spending a lot of money and gathering tens of thousands of laborers to work on this mountainous area for several months now. This project had begun to show initial results. At this moment, Liang Yue stood on a high hill, overlooking the magnificent scene that seemed to gather the spiritual essence of heaven and earth, and couldn't help but feel a sense of inexplicable emotion. He saw that a mountain that was slightly lower but covered a wide area was directly cut off at the waist, surrounded by overlapping hills. A flat area of more than 1,000 meters was cut out. Roughly calculated, it was equivalent to the total area of 7 or 8 football fields. The exposed land was compacted bit by bit, making it extremely flat. This, presumably, was the main venue for this exchange meeting. Around the arena, in the 4 directions of southeast, northwest, there were also 20 or 30 steps of semi-meter-high open-air stands, and a rostrum stood on the east side of the arena. In addition, in the intervals of the stands, 4 huge white marble stone sculptures were still in a semi-finished state, with piles of carving and scaffolding tools scattered around from the outlines of these stone sculptures. It was not difficult for people to see that the originals of the 4 stone statues should be the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Suzaku, and Xuanwu, the 4 guardian beasts at this moment, surrounded by mountains of red leaves. Figures were eagerly and enthusiastically jumping and moving forward from the surrounding hills, and in the shouts and whistles echoing through the mountains, they landed on the competition field one after another. The fiery atmosphere and momentum quickly dispelled the mist that shrouded the mountains. A stream like a white jade ribbon quietly flowed out from the distant valley, dividing into 2 at the foot of the mountain below the arena, surrounding it for a week, and then quietly disappearing towards the other side of the mountains. Liang Yue stood in the distance and observed the direction of the arena for a long time. In addition to the many Jianghu people who were rushing to participate in the selection competition, he also found a group of spectators with a distinct style on another mountain surrounded by red leaves. Some of them were wearing suits and leather shoes, some were wearing dark samurai costumes with swords hanging from their waists, some were wearing kimonos, holding round fans to cover half of their faces, some were bare-chested and bald, and their bodies were wrapped in several circles of metal chains. Although he knew that this group of people were alien people sent by the island country to investigate the situation, Liang Yue didn't care at this time. After just taking a few glances and remembering those faces one by one, he turned his head and observed the crowd in the arena. Just like that, about another hour passed when the electronic clock of the intelligent brain Xiaowu just reached 8 o'clock. A convoy composed of 8 military jeeps suddenly arrived from a temporarily built road between the mountains. It took nearly 20 minutes to drive from one side of the hill to the foot of the mountain where the arena was located. Later, the car doors opened, and a group of more than 20 people came down one after another. Among them were middle-aged monks with prayer beads, middle-aged Taoists with beards, martial artists in long robes and mandarin jackets, and strong young men in Shongshan suits. At this moment, they were guarding a slightly bloated man on the side. After stretching a little, they walked slowly along the bluestone avenue in the mountains towards the arena. After carefully looking at the man in the middle, with a kind and amiable expression on his face, and confirming that the other party was the main character, Liang Yue did not hesitate any longer. With a movement of his feet, his whole body drew a smooth arc in the air, and fell lightly from the depths of the red leaves onto the arena. In fact, Liang Yue's behavior was not abrupt. Because he was not the only one doing this in the arena like him, there were 7 or 8 people who had been waiting around and had not arrived yet. However, with Liang Yue's current experience, he couldn't really tell whether they were here to participate in the selection competition, or whether they were here one step ahead to clear the field and eliminate potential threats from the official power. About a quarter of an hour later, Yuan Datao, panting heavily, supported by a young man, walked in from one side of the arena with a smile on his face, his forehead full of sweat. Then, he clasped his fists all the way, greeted everyone, and walked enthusiastically towards the direction of the rostrum. Chapter 515 Brain Collapse. And so, the following time naturally transitioned into a spirited opening speech personally presided over by Yuan Datao. However, this old fellow clearly understood that the reason why these 1,000-plus Jianghu people with extraordinary skills had gathered here was not to listen to his nonsense. Therefore, Yuan Datao's speech was very short, ending in just 5 or 6 minutes. Among them, he emphasized the future treatment and benefits of the many Jianghu freelancers present. His words, both directly and indirectly, implied that he wanted to recruit them, these gifted individuals. Just like recruiting an army, the actual rules of this selection competition were only explained in a few sentences. This selection will be a free-for-all competition, and there are only 5 places. Those of you who can stand firm until the end, the remaining 5 will be the winners of this selection. Afterwards, they will represent all the colleagues present, together with the other 5 from the famous X of Jianghu, represent our China to participate in that exchange conference. Now I announce, this selection officially begins. I hope that you all, bearing in mind that we are all Chinese compatriots, can defeat your opponents, but absolutely must not deliver fatal blows. As Yuan Datao's announcement landed, the many Jianghu people in the arena instantly burst out with great enthusiasm, as if injected with chicken blood, and the air above the entire arena exploded for a time. Shouts, battle cries, the sounds of energy bursts, the sounds of energy traversing, the sounds of blood rushing, screams, wails, and various other noises were endless. As for what Datao said later, no one cared at all. Liang Yue, because he landed relatively late, was squeezed out of the main group and found himself on the edge of the arena. Therefore, He actually gained a small advantage at this time, although he himself didn't care about these things. Being able to avoid becoming the target of everyone's combined attacks in the first place was indeed a small blessing. In fact, after Yuan Datao's announcement, most people present had already realized the severity of the situation, so, almost without hesitation, they burst out with their life-saving methods, launching attacks on the strangers around them at the same time. Moreover, they themselves rushed quickly towards the direction away from the crowd in the first moment. Unfortunately, there were too many people gathered in front of the podium. Thousands of gifted individuals erupted at the same time, whether they practiced ki, practiced boxing, practiced weapons, practiced Taoism, or played with abilities. Regardless of the power of their moves, when thousands of people shot at the same time, the momentum was definitely worthy of being called ghosts crying and gods howling, and the world would change color for it. For a time, the turbulent and chaotic gale rapidly spread to the surrounding area, and then vented upwards in a swirling motion. Although Yuan Datao on the podium was not targeted, he was still shocked by this momentum and retreated repeatedly, his eyes showing horror. Even the few gifted individuals who were originally responsible for accompanying him and blocking in front of him to protect him were somewhat unable to resist at this time, so they quickly retreated while blocking, quickly protecting Datao and transferring him to a safe area. Liang Yue, on the other hand, put a layer of purple golden light shield on himself in the first moment, and then stayed in place, watching the exceptionally fierce melee in the crowd on the opposite side from a distance. And such a lively scene naturally could not be without the participation of Narikori and Nana, although they didn't come to the scene with him at this time. In fact, before the start of the competition, the girls had already prepared various kinds of melon seeds, nuts, snacks and many other snacks, waiting by the magma stove at this time, in a place that others could not see. A whole row of video communication windows were directly lined up behind Liang Yue. For a time, the crowd on the opposite side was fighting happily, and the girls on this side were also making various comments and pointing fingers. They were whispering to each other as if they were watching a live TV broadcast, and they couldn't stop at all. Heya. Finally, after escaping from the surging crowd of melee, some Jianghu strangers who considered themselves to be quite capable turned their heads and found Liang Yue, who seemed to be leisurely here. It seemed that he thought the scenery here was particularly good, and someone was now looking like he was alone and weak, so 7 or 8 casual gifted cultivators nearby immediately looked at each other, and then greeted a few times with tacit understanding. In the next moment, they launched a siege offensive against Liang Yue from all directions, such as left, right, up, down, close combat, and long range. For a time, double knives, daggers, awls, flying needles, and even metal plates turned. All kinds of weapons were tumbling up and down. Everything that should be there was there. Unfortunately, just as these people approached, an invisible force rolled them up, wrapped them, rotated them, took them around in the air, and then threw these people back into the distant melee formation. A female gifted cultivator who used needles against him from a distance, although she was dozens of meters away, still did not escape Liang Yue's revenge. An air-separated brain collapse directly knocked the opponent upside down. The forehead turned purple, and a bulge grew rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. After that, naturally, there was no escape from the fate of falling back into the large army. Looking back at Liang Yue himself, he never moved a step from beginning to end, and still stood there with a calm and indifferent look. This kind of method made some people who were peeping in the dark frown, and at the same time they were wary. They temporarily dispelled the idea of coming over to fight. After all, although the situation on the field is very anxious now, the game has just begun, wanting to determine 5 winners through a free for all competition among a team of thousands of gifted individuals is too variable, just like Liang Yue now. As time passed by, every minute and every second, the gifted individuals who could still stand in the field were becoming fewer and fewer. From the break of dawn to the sun rising 3 poles from the beginning, there were thousands of people crowded together, to the later hundreds of people, and then to the hundreds of people until the end. Only 12 gifted individuals remained on the entire arena. Among them, except for Liang Yue, who was still wearing a layer of purple golden light shield, eating melons with a calm expression, most of the others were already wounded. At least, they all looked bruised, swollen, and disheveled. Under this circumstance, the strength of everyone in the field was naturally obvious. These 12 who were able to persist without falling were of course all talented people who had experienced hundreds of battles, and whose abilities and strategies were quite outstanding. But unfortunately, this is not enough, because according to the rules set before the game, the winners of this selection competition can only be 5 at present. There are still 7 who need to be eliminated. On the podium in the distance, Yuan Datao had returned to the main seat under the protection of those gifted individuals. looking forward to watching. His face was full of hesitation and excitement. A large group of medical staff in white coats had arrived at some point and began to treat some of the wounded located on the edge of the arena. Chapter 516 Angry King Kong. Finally, under the simultaneous confrontation of the 12 people in the arena, the second round of the competition began. Those who could stand out from the chaotic battle of thousands of metahumans and persevere to the end were naturally the elite members of the metahuman teams. Therefore, although the number of people had decreased, the intensity had not weakened much. Fortunately, taking advantage of the stalemate and adjustment period of the 12 people in the arena, those eliminated contestants lying on the field seemed to have foreseen the fierce duel that would follow. Therefore, in order to avoid being implicated in the second round of the competition, most of those in the arena who could move and had some awareness began to actively withdraw, using both hands and feet to move towards the edge of the arena. Those who were unable to move on their own due to serious injuries also withdrew from the competition area with the help of those around them and medical staff. After everyone had left the field, in just a few seconds, a powerful mixed aura rose from the arena among them. Some had blood energy like dragons, with a faint aura of blood rushing to the top of their heads. Some seemed to be coated with a layer of bronze paint, with a heavy aura like a mountain around them. Some had a layer of hazy mist floating outside their bodies like ghosts, carrying a hint of fishy stench and dizziness. Still others, despite their young age, had extremely pure power, with a layer of substantial radiance covering their bodies like Liang Yue. But at this moment, the light was a more dazzling gold. The next moment, 5 of the 12 people moved instantly, as if they had agreed in advance. Each of them took the initiative to find an opponent, and after a few exchanges, they delineated a range in the wide arena and competed back and forth. Only Liang Yue, for the time being, had no opponent. As one of the only 2 idle people in the arena, the one not far away was now showing a look of hesitation and entanglement. This person seemed to be a monk, with a shaved head, and his exposed upper body looked very thin, with a thick layer of bronze paint smeared on his body. He was the kind of ruthless character who looked like an 18 bronze man at a glance. At this time, this person's aura was quite extraordinary, with a circle of earthy yellow light surrounding his body, heavy as a mountain, giving people a sense of solidity like earth and stone. Placed in today's arena, even among the final 12, he would definitely be a top contender. But unfortunately, the aura displayed by Liang Yue was even stronger at this time. He was still covered by a layer of translucent purple-gold light, which had not changed since the beginning of the competition. However, when the competition reached the second half, and only 12 of them remained in the arena, in order to express his seriousness about the upcoming competition, Liang Yue also shook his shoulders and showed a new trick. Who knew that his move seemed to scare everyone? At this moment, behind Liang Yue, a purple light shadow about 10 meters high was quietly floating there. It was a quasi-substantial half-body human figure. Its entire body was filled with overwhelming purple, and every form, transition and line that was outlined seemed to have been smudged with ink painting, with appropriate shades, elegant and natural upon closer inspection. The face hidden behind the faint purple seemed to be Liang Yue himself. Even the Taoist robe he was wearing was exactly the same as the one he was wearing in the wide sleeves. 2 quasi-substantial straight swords were now being held in the hands of this human figure, and the long blades had extended to a range of more than 10 meters in front of Liang Yue. With a slight shake, the blades had not even fallen, and merely the purple wrapped around the blades had brushed against it, and the originally solid ground had already gained smooth cuts. As a legendary figure in the ninja world, Liang Yue was naturally qualified to read a secret that originally belonged to the Land of Fire. After learning it, he modified it, and it soon became his own. In fact, Liang Yue's original intention was to develop a powerful ninjutsu that could rival the Uchiha clan's Susanoo. After all, they were both bloodlines of the Otsutsuki clan, and there was no reason why your family could awaken this wonderful once they opened their eyes to a certain extent. But my Tensigan has been promoted, but there is still no reaction. So, after a round of careful research, he finally researched something. At this time, what Liang Yue was showing to everyone was just the first form of this. It was a bit like the Susanoo's skeleton mode, only maintaining its power to a limited extent, without any intention of using its full power. However, even so, it still made the remaining 11 people in the arena, as well as the spectators outside the arena, feel frightened. With faces full of shock, the 10 who had already started to delineate areas for competition in the arena were actually just a little faster, and under the competition between the 2 sides, they seemed to be fighting fiercely, not giving way to each other. The monk on the opposite side, however, did not seem to be good at lightning skills, and after a moment of hesitation, he was left in place. In the end, after staring at Liang Yue for a few seconds, his face flushed red. the monk still failed to hypnotize himself and muster the courage to rush up and fight him instead. He adhered to the consistent shameless tradition of Buddhism after silently chanting Amitabha. He simply turned around and ran straight towards a nearby battlefield. He joined forces with another metahuman who seemed to be familiar with him, ignoring his teammates' surprise and astonishment. Under the scolding of the person fighting against them, he attacked his opponent with a face full of saliva. Therefore, in the situation where a 2-on-1 intrusion was successful, the balanced situation in the arena was suddenly broken. A battle circle quickly determined the winner. After the first cooperation, the two winners seemed to have developed a tacit understanding, and after looking at each other, they unexpectedly rushed to different battlefields. Therefore, two 2-on-1 situations were formed again. Before long, the outcome was decided again. The winner was probably the kind who had some friendship with the monk. In this way, in less than 10 minutes, the 12 people in the arena had determined the outcome. This was much faster than expected. Liang Yue naturally had nothing to say. He automatically obtained a promotion qualification by default. No one came to compete with him for this either. Among the remaining 6 winners, the monk very simply chose to withdraw. In addition, a close-range fighter who was a little seriously injured, after thinking about it again and again, also hesitated and withdrew from this selection. In this way, the pre-exchange selection competition came to an end. Although it was a bit anticlimactic, it at least selected a few elite metahumans with real talent and practical skills. As for the remaining ones, although they lost, they were still glorious in defeat. Being able to stand out from the 1,000-person melee, it is estimated that as long as they are willing, they will naturally be reused by Yuan Datao. Chapter 517 A Gathering of Great Forces. After the selection ended, everyone present was gathered again by Yuan Datao, including those who had been eliminated during the free-for-all. Not a single one was left out then. Food and wine were bestowed, and they made merry together. Various hard dishes such as chicken, duck, fish, and meat were supplied almost without limit. A large number of seasonal vegetables and fruits were brought to the competition ground. Regardless of labor and cost, only those who were seriously injured during the competition were temporarily treated by the medical team aside, but the subsequent medical expenses were still borne by Datao. An insightful person could tell at a glance that the consumption of thousands of people like this must be a considerable expense. But Yuan Shike himself had a ruddy complexion and a bright smile. It was as if the scene of everyone drinking and eating meat in large bowls was not costing him money and food, but giving Yuan a lot of face from this. It can also be seen how much importance this person attached to the selection and recruitment of the gifted. In addition, it can also reflect Yuan Datao's temperament to a certain extent. He's really generous. I just don't know whether the expenses of everyone this time are from the private property of the Yuan family or from public taxes. Come, Taoist priest Liang, try this. This is a rare fruit that the people below managed to collect this year. Although it can't compare with those rare immortal spiritual objects, it can be regarded as a treasure of the mountains and fields. Indeed, it is rare. During the banquet, Liang Yue and the other 12 who stood out from the free-for-all had been specially invited to the main stage. After a while, a plate of unusual fruit was brought to him. If judged purely from the appearance, color, and smell, the fruit in the plate in front of him should undoubtedly be grapes. But Liang Yue had seen round, flat, and long grapes, and had eaten soft and hard ones, but he had never seen anything like the one in front of him, each the size of a peach, and crystal clear. So, he reached out and picked one from the bunch, held it in his palm, and squeezed it. It felt a little hard, so it should be the kind with firm flesh. With one bite, the sweetness burst in his mouth, and there was a hint of sourness in the sweetness. Based on Liang Yue's many years of experience in eating fruits, this thing is definitely wild. It belongs to the kind that grows in the mountains and fields, and has formed a unique flavor after a long period of sunshine and rain. It is a special product that fruits carefully cared for in fields do not have. That is a pure sweetness that is not supplied and piled up with various sufficient nutrients. The ratio of sweetness to sourness is just right, as if it is full of a wild atmosphere. Overall, the firm flesh of this fruit is similar to that of raisins, but the flavor is softer than that of grapes. Plus the fruit itself has a diameter of 7 or 8 centimeters. Although this is just an ordinary fruit, not even close to a spiritual species, if it can be carefully cultivated, it definitely has considerable economic value. Good stuff. This is the first time I've eaten this kind of grape. Haha, if Taoist priest likes it, eat more. This kind of fruit was recently discovered in a remote corner of Ludong. The locals thought it tasted good, so they used it to pay taxes. If Taoist priest also thinks it's good, then we should cultivate this thing on a large scale. Maybe in the future, it can be used to benefit the people. The president is far-sighted, and I really admire him. Taoist priest, you flatter me. Being in this position, seeking welfare for the people and peace for the world is my duty. Regarding this fist-sized grapefruit, the author saw it on the internet. I have forgotten the specific source, but I only remember that a Shandong netizen said that his grandmother or grandmother told him that there used to be such grapes growing on a cliff in his hometown. It was very delicious, but the locals wanted to transplant it but couldn't grow it. Later, during the war years, it was burned by the little devils. Whether it is true or not, the author has not verified it, so let's just assume it is. A banquet did not last long. After all, this is a wilderness. Although the surrounding environment is not bad and there are many people on the scene, it is very lively after a few bowls of wine. However, most of the people present are not idle people. After about an hour or so, after eating and drinking enough, everyone got up and left in groups of 3 or 5 during this period. Yuan Datao did not talk much about recruiting and serving him. Presumably he himself felt that now was not the time. Just like that, not to mention how the people in the arena will be arranged afterwards. Liang Yue directly used his lightness skill after leaving, and returned home in a while after the grapes were made into seeds. He distributed them to teacher Jinxiang and Nana and others, asking them to return to the stronghold world to carefully plant them. Liang Yue also plans to introduce this thing back to China after returning to reality. It is best to contract a piece of land for large-scale planting. In the following time, Liang Yue's life entered a period of calm again. However, although it was calm, he and a group of young ladies around him were not idle. After a round of high intensity and continuous cracking, the intelligent brain Xiao finally got control of the Kryptonian spaceship. At the first time the spaceship was opened, Liang Yue personally took out the several Kryptonian corpses in the hibernation cabin. After leaving enough experimental materials for Xiao to study, he sent the remaining remains to a remote wilderness. He dug a pit, buried them, and erected a wordless stone tablet for them. It can be regarded as the last thing he, an Earthling, did for these alien visitors. As for whether Superman will have no clothes to wear because of the lack of Kryptonian tights, it's none of Liang Yue's business. If you don't have clothes, sew them yourself. At worst, go back to the original trend of wearing red underwear outside, and losing a piece of clothing is not losing a piece of meat. After solving the control problem of the Kryptonian spaceship, the intelligent brain Xiao finally had some idle calculation capacity, so, at Liang Yue's request, a batch of professional assembly line gun production machines were quickly made by it with a supply of a large number of raw materials. This is not a problem at all with the resources Xiao currently has. The use and practice of gun kata requires the use of guns in the current DC Universe time period. A large number of firearms are also needed. Even to some extent, guns and a sufficient amount of ammunition are the most reliable hard currency. Sometimes more precious than gold, silver, antiques, food, and other things. During this period, Liang Yue originally wanted to go to the European battlefield again, wanting to take advantage of the war to find the whereabouts of the mother box, but unfortunately, there was no time at all. Since the last selection competition, Yuan Datao has been trying his best to win him over. Basically, there is a small banquet every 3 days and a big invitation every 5 days, and you can't refuse because he always greets people with a smile, and he is very considerate in terms of etiquette. Moreover, the people invited to his banquet, in addition to him, are also famous people in the Chinese gifted world, such as seniors and talents Wu Dang, Shaolin, Emery, King Sheng, Longhu Mountain, Maoshan, Miao Jiang, Tangman, Northeast Chuma. For a time, various gifted world-related forces appeared on the stage. Taking this opportunity, Liang Yue also got to know and cram a lot about the characters and inheritance of the Chinese gifted world. Recently, he has gained a lot. Chapter 518 Doi. Time flies just like that. Amidst the hustle and bustle, a month had passed in the blink of an eye. At this time, the city of Beeping had already reached the end of autumn. Since a few days ago, almost every morning, a layer of white frost would form on the ground. Early winter quietly arrived, and the weather was gradually turning cold, but the atmosphere in Beeping was becoming more and more fiery, reaching a climax today, early this morning, when the sky had just begun to brighten. Those foreigners who were usually out of reach and arrogant in the eyes of ordinary people were now appearing on the streets one after another, traveling in groups, driving all kinds of vehicles, and roaring towards the northwest direction outside the city. Some were in 2s and 3s, some in groups of 3 or 5, including Westerners and Japanese. Some were dressed in suits and leather shoes, some in long gowns and mandarin jackets, and some were wearing strange national costumes, such as various samurai outfits, fur cloaks, and heavy floral skirts. But more were troops in military uniforms. Among them, some were of noble status. Just those recognized by the common people strolling on the streets included the ambassadors and their wives from several countries stationed in China. There were also numerous members of the Republican government, police chiefs, ministers of education, presidents and teachers of Yanjing University, and even some remnants of the Qing dynasty at this time. They were all in a hurry, but vaguely showing a hint of excitement. Finally, they gathered at the city gate and formed a huge convoy, which then advanced in unison. Seeing this situation, anyone with a little discernment knew that something big was about to happen. Whether it was good or bad was not yet certain. But the fact that it could attract the attention of so many Chinese and foreign dignitaries meant that the matter was definitely not simple. As a result, some busybodies, with their hearts full of curiosity, couldn't help but secretly follow along through various means. However, those who truly had the ability to reach the heavens and connect with certain levels of power had already understood the whole story of this matter. Those who were qualified to go to the scene to observe today were basically already in that team. Those who were not qualified to watch, but still knew the ins and outs of the matter, mostly kept silent about it, consciously following a tacit understanding, and had no intention of publicizing it. Therefore, those who only wanted to follow the crowd out of curiosity were basically stopped by the soldiers guarding the roads after leaving the city. Liang Yue, as a participant in this exchange conference, was naturally among them, and was fortunate enough to get a ride in a separate car at this time. Besides the driver, Nana and Zhao were also sitting beside him, accompanying him to watch the excitement. In fact, it wasn't just Liang Yue. The other participants, spectators, and even some military personnel responsible for the surrounding security work, who were also relatively high-ranking, could bring one or two disciples or younger relatives to watch. The most exaggerated were the foreign envoys to China and Yuan Datao's family, who brought a large group of people with them. But there was no way around it. That's just the way the times were, and privilege permeated almost the entire history of human development. Dao Yu, this Yuan Datao is trying to roast me over a fire during the journey. Nana and Zhao, sitting on either side of Liang Yue, were dressed in standard cyan black Taoist robes with white linings, peering out the car windows with curious expressions. Secretly, they had been in constant video communication with the women at home at this time. Liang Yue was calmly playing with a small bronze token in his hand. The edges of the token were engraved with dragon and tiger patterns, and the back was a classic Bagua yin yang fish pattern. On the main part of the front of the token, two characters were carved in relief. The two characters Dao Yi can be viewed separately. Dao represents the Taoist lineage, referring to the participant's own heritage and history. Yi only refers to an order. Its original meaning was simple and direct, basically no different from Jia Yi, Year, Bing Sen, and so on. But the problem is that at this moment, when the two characters Dao and Yi are put together, it is ambiguous. Dao Yi. Probably as long as it is a Chinese person, almost naturally, they will interpret these two characters as meaning number one. In Daoism, is it touting the Holder school, heritage, or strength? You must know that Liang Yue himself, in the eyes of outsiders, is just a young man. His skills are good, but at best he is just an unknown figure. And at this Sino-Japanese Supernatural Power Exchange Conference, he is not the only Taoist school participating. Mount Longhu, Maoshan, Wudang, Qingcheng, Quanzhen Dao, and other schools and traditions have always regarded themselves as the orthodox Taoist sect since ancient times. In terms of qualifications and inheritance, they are all well-known celebrities. Now, Yuan Datao, as the president of China, gave such a token engraved with Dao Yi to Liang Yue. What does this mean? According to this line of thinking, who was Dao or and Dao San given to? Who can willingly accept this arrangement? Anyway, no matter how Yuan Datao arranged it later, Liang Yue was definitely used by him, and because of this, he has become a controversial figure in the eyes of some people, to some extent, even a thorn in their side. Although it is not to the point of wanting to get rid of him quickly, the knot in their hearts must have been planted. Just like that, driving on a newly built Kangzhuang Avenue, winding and twisting all the way, admiring the frost and red leaves on the mountains after flying for about 20 minutes, the bloated convoy had arrived at the mountain road at the foot of the arena. It took another half an hour for the team of more than 1,000 people to arrive at the arena one after another, and they sat down in the fields and seats that had been divided in advance. At this time, the stands were no longer the bare stone slabs they were before. Thick futons and low tables and chairs had been arranged properly. Hot tea, freshly roasted melon seeds and peanuts were also brought up on the rostrum on one side of the arena. Circuits had even been installed, and several amplifying devices were connected at this time. The morning mist had gradually dissipated above the sky, the warm morning light was breaking through the mountains, and diagonally sprinkled on the arena the red leaves all over the mountains. At this moment, are like small reflectors, scattering the sunlight together with the frost between the veins of the leaves, covering the entire hill at this moment, around the arena. It seemed as if a colorful cloud was rising, making people unconsciously feel a sense of being in a fairyland. Chapter 519 Number 1 in Sumo? After all the spectators had arrived, Yuan Datao and the others on the stage didn't immediately start the exchange meeting. However, as participants from both sides, Liang Yue and the others had already begun their pre-match warm-ups. Especially those independent cultivators who had emerged from the selection rounds were now even more active, all eager to get started, stretching their limbs and joints. Of course, this didn't include Liang Yue at this moment. He, along with many people from famous sects all over China, were basically in the same state that was, closing their eyes to rest and sitting upright in the seats reserved for the contestants, meditating and adjusting their breathing. In fact, despite Yuan Datao making such a big show before the competition, accepting registrations from Jianghu, martial arts world, people from all over the place, and having a 1,000-person melee, seemingly valuing those independent cultivators who stood out, the truth was, according to the arrangements made last night and at the previous banquet, the real ability exchange competition today would still be dominated by the elite members of various inherited factions. The independent cultivators were only responsible for assisting and filling in as substitutes. In other words, they were just sitting on the sidelines. Of course, this also didn't include Liang Yue. After all, he was the one who had obtained the Daoyi token. How could someone so valued by Yuan Datao not make a strong impression and perform on stage first? Sure enough, after about another half an hour, the ambassadors and officials in the arena finally began to show some impatience, appearing to be whispering to each other. As for the participants from both China and Japan, as time went on, they also became increasingly confrontational. In fact, not only them, the participants who were about to engage in life and death duels, but even the spectators on both sides were already glaring at each other, their gazes colliding in the air, creating fierce sparks. Seeing this, Liang Yue couldn't help but shake his head slightly. It wasn't that he opposed the competitive atmosphere in the arena, but he simply felt that there was no need to make the exchange with a small island nation so confrontational. It was too degrading. Just then, sensing a change in the atmosphere and seeing that his own players had finished adjusting their breathing and resting, Yuan Datao finally stood up with a smiling face. He walked to the microphone and made a few polite remarks to the audience, then shouted a few slogans about friendship first, competition second, and announced the official start of the competition immediately afterward. China and Japan each sent a representative to the stage to draw the numbers of the contestants from boxes filled with slips of paper. It's worth mentioning that the person from the Chinese side drawing lots was a representative from the Nanjing Provisional Government, seemingly a young man surnamed Wang with a good spirit. As for the participants on the Chinese side, they were truly full of talent. At least, in Liang Yue's eyes, his teammates seemed to be a group of elite figures not to be underestimated. They were, respectively, two direct disciples of the Zhang family from Longhu Mountain, senior brother and sister Lin Jifang from Maotian, two Taoist priests, Zhouan Lu from Wuding Mountain, a closed-door disciple of the abbot of the Wu generation from Shaolin Temple, the leading figures of the younger generation from the Hu and Liu families of the Northeast Exorcist sect, a personal disciple of the Zhuan Sefu sect leader, the new successor to the beggar clan leader Tang Xiaozhen, and Tang Xiaosi, the personal disciples of the Tang Jiabao fortress lord. Leaving aside their abilities, just their backgrounds and names were enough to shock the audience. Looking at Yuan Datao on the stage at this moment, sitting firmly like a fisherman, with a majestic and condescending look, it was estimated that he himself might not have expected that his previous order would attract so much support from famous sects recently. Almost every day closer to the date of the exchange competition, Yuan Datao's confidence would increase by a few points. There was no other way. In the days leading up to the competition, the elite disciples of those famous sects began to arrive from all over China, as if rushing to fair. Originally a little lacking in confidence, Datao finally experienced the joy of being the man of the hour. With so many talented people under his command, he began to speak and make decisions with more confidence. In the first match, representing China is Dao Yi. Representing Japan is Xiang Yi. Under the public gaze, with a loud announcement from an old gentleman with ring hair, wearing a long robe and Mandarin jacket, the originally noisy atmosphere in the arena suddenly quieted down in an instant. Hundreds of eyes turned to him, feeling the burning gazes from all directions. Liang Yue couldn't help but click his tongue inwardly. Sure enough, this title wasn't so easy to take. Silently standing up from his seat, he looked up and saw a figure also looking at him from the Japanese side's participant seats. It was a burly man at least 2 meters tall, with a top knot on his head and a face painted with a garish, red and black ghost mask as he slowly stood up. The gray, white fur cloak that had been draped over his shoulders was thrown off, revealing his impressive physique. He was wearing heavy wooden clogs, a loincloth around his waist, and a belt made of wooden strips with tassels hanging down. His upper body was bare, with a round belly and naturally drooping breasts. His whole body was wide and rough, and every step he took created 5 or 6 layers of ripples on his body. Just his figure standing in the arena caused a crowd of spectators to look at him in surprise. They began to unconsciously utter various exclamations, especially the female comrades. In the Republic of China, the overall atmosphere was generally conservative and traditional, and for a time, many of the women present unconsciously covered their eyes. In comparison, Liang Yue's height of about 1.9 meters, although also considered strong, seemed much slender in comparison. So, this Xiang refers to a sumo wrestler? As for that Yue, did he win first place in a sumo competition? Taking a few light steps, Liang Yue, looking at the figure opposite him, couldn't help but have many thoughts flash through his mind. He began to use his knowledge and deductions to constantly rehearse the person's attack patterns, but until the end, he couldn't really figure it out. Dong. 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 Just then, the sumo wrestler from Japan seemed to have been unable to wait. After entering the arena, with a loud shout full of energy, he clenched his thick palms, and a layer of vigorous energy suddenly emanated from his body, like sweat but not sweat, like water but not water, instantly distorting the surrounding air into a semi-transparent color. Then, he opened his thick radish legs and charged towards Liang Yue in a rather awkward posture, but the speed was surprisingly fast. Each step he took left a small pit in the thick ground under his feet. Everywhere he passed, earth and rocks flew. In the blink of an eye, he was already within 30 meters of Liang Yue. Then, he spread his fingers wide, his arms waving wildly, creating blurred after images in front of him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 520, Earth-type Ninja? Clearly, this sumo wrestler on the other side has some skills. Accompanied by a continuous stream of strange cries from his mouth, in just a moment, his pair of fleshy palms danced out a dense array of after images in front of him, and with his rapid advance, like a constantly floating wall, he crushed towards Liang Yue with an overwhelming momentum. However, Liang Yue was somewhat disdainful of this. The corners of his mouth curved slightly, and with a wave of his hand, a blurry purple light shot out in an instant. Chirp! In an instant, accompanied by a crisp metallic sound, the purple light directly pierced through the seemingly endless wall of palm prints in front of him. Subsequently, the purple shadow carried a powerful penetrating force, directly piercing through the opponent's head. The layer of blurry energy surrounding his body was like paper, unable to form any obstruction. Accompanied by a muffled sound of poof, the sumo wrestler's head was instantly shattered like a ripe watermelon with a single blow. Whether it was the bones inside or the various red and white substances, they all burst open in an instant, splashing everywhere. The seemingly overwhelming and insurmountable palm shadows disappeared without a trace. In an instant, his fat body below the head lost control and fell softly to the ground, driven by inertia. It slid forward 2 or 3 meters before stopping. Whoa! This sudden turn of events was definitely beyond the expectations of most people present. In their speculation, the two on the field would have to go through a difficult and intense competition before they could finally determine the winner, and if only from the size point of view, Liang Yue seems to be the disadvantaged side. Therefore, at the moment of deciding the winner, most of the audience was stunned and almost stood up from their seats involuntarily. Among them, even the participants on both sides. Exclamations and astonishment were endless. Some of the more timid foreign spectators, looking at the headless corpse in the arena from a distance, their faces changed color unconsciously, and their chests heaved up and down. In contrast, the teammates on our side, as well as a group of Chinese officials around the rostrum, and even Yuan Datao and others, were very satisfied with this result. On the other side, the Japanese side was just the opposite, each one looking as if their mother had died, their faces ugly, their eyes were like sharp knives, each carrying a fierce, sinister, and eager to kill gaze, stabbing fiercely at someone. Unfortunately, Liang Yue turned a deaf ear to this. After the opponent fell to the ground, he didn't even have the interest to look at him, and directly turned around and walked slowly towards his seat. In this China-Japan Special Abilities Exchange Tournament, first match, China Dao Yi wins. The old man on the rostrum in charge of announcing the results quickly reacted, and then, with a face full of surprise, shouted into the microphone the next moment, The whole place was in an uproar, and the stands were full of cheering people, even though these people themselves have extraordinary backgrounds and usually pay attention to cultivation and etiquette. Since the beginning of the last century, there have been too many disappointing things happening on Chinese soil. The country is weak externally, and internally it's either civil war, warlord melee, or north-south disputes. In short, it's all kinds of upsetting things over a long period of time. People's hearts have naturally been covered with a layer of shadow. Therefore, this makes every victory seem precious, even if it's just a small win. It's enough to become the talk of many people on weekdays like now. To formally defeat a Japanese opponent head-on in the arena can definitely be called a rare victory. Taoist Liang Yue's exquisite hidden weapon skills. Just as he had just taken his seat, Tang Xiaoxi from the Tang sect not far away looked over and said to him with a look of surprise, that person's own skills are too poor. He rushed straight up as soon as he entered the arena, and he lacked the defensive means to show off. It's not difficult to win against him. My skills are not that rare. Taoist is too modest. The one who played for China was still the young man from the south, and the Japanese side did not change people. After a while, the paper slips drawn by the two were handed to the old man with white hair. The old man spread out the paper and took a look. A look of surprise flashed across his face. Then he turned his head to look at Yuan Datao behind him, and pondered for a while. Then he pursed his lips and said loudly into the microphone, in the second match of the China-Japan exchange tournament, the Japanese side will be represented by Ninja 2, and the Chinese side will be represented by Dao Yi. Is it possible to play repeatedly? After hearing the old man's words on the stage, the surrounding audience suddenly fell silent, and then there was another buzzing noise. Although he was a little hesitant in his heart, Liang Yue did not hesitate at this time, raised his hand to signal to his teammates around him, greeted them, and then continued to head towards the arena. Ninja 2, that is to say, this time the opponent is a ninja. Speaking of which, Liang Yue is too familiar with the profession of ninja. He had just returned from a ninja world not a few months ago, and now he has encountered one again. In this case, when Liang Yue looked at his opponent, he couldn't help but feel a bit curious. I saw that the person on the opposite side was wearing a dark brown night suit, with a turban wrapped around his head, and his mouth and nose were covered tightly with a square scarf of the same color, only revealing a pair of eyes outside. Behind him, he was also carrying two somewhat short katanas. To be honest, the other party's outfit is more in line with Liang Yue's impression of the image of the Japanese ninja profession. In comparison, the ninjas in the Naruto world wear whatever they want, which is a bit too casual. The energy in the body is not chakra, but the nature is somewhat similar, and there is also a clear earth attribute bias with his Tensigan eyes. Almost as soon as he glanced at him, Liang Yue had already seen through the other party's background. Waiting for the two sides to get closer, gradually came to the center of the arena, less than 100 meters apart. This game has no suspense. Bang, without any nonsense, I saw the ninja on the opposite side suddenly shake his small hand, and an earthen smoke bomb was thrown out in an instant, accompanied by a muffled explosion. The area within a dozen meters around the smoke bomb was suddenly filled with smoke and dust, making it impossible to see clearly. Vaguely, there was still a choking smell in the air, and at this moment, the ninja took advantage of the moment when the sight of other people was obstructed, and used an earth escape to directly plunge into the compacted soil under his feet. In this way, thinking that he was very clever and hidden, he lurked underground with the convenience of earth-based ninjutsu. In just a few breaths, he had already entered the ground within 10 meters of Liang Yue's side. Unfortunately, what this guy doesn't know is that since he stepped onto the arena, all his actions have been under Liang Yue's close watch. And what this ninja probably doesn't want to know even more is that since the Naruto world, what Liang Yue is best at dealing with is actually these earth-based ninjas, because Liang Yue's main cultivation technique, evergreen art, follows the wood attribute route. Chapter 521 Wood Sea Urchin. Dong. After a muffled sound, a rumbling noise followed. The originally flat ground immediately began to vibrate slightly. Subsequently, a small slope about a meter high slowly rose up, looking from a distance like a solitary grave suddenly erected on a flat ground abrupt in a catching chi. In the next moment, the mound was suddenly broken open, and amidst the splashing soil and rocks, a verdant vine like a spirit snake shot into the sky, curving and winding. It grew as tall as 7 or 8 meters before stopping. At this time, the vine was winding, its branches were dense, and its shape was natural. Except for the absence of leaves, it was almost a perfect plant. However, on the branches and thorns of such a vine, a person was hanging at this moment. The intense pain made this ninja, even one who had undergone rigorous training, unable to bear it for a moment, and his whole body began to tremble uncontrollably. However, even in this situation, he still looked unwilling to submit, and when he looked at Liang Yue below, his eyes were full of determination and madness. Slowly, he struggled to raise one of his hands, trembling, gritting his teeth, and began to try to draw the short knife from his back. Then, in the next moment, accompanied by a muffled PFFT sound, the vine that pierced through his chest cavity suddenly underwent a violent secondary growth. The situation was as if someone had implanted a super large sea urchin in his chest in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of sharp thorns burst out simultaneously. The dense branches, along with the ninja's torso, limbs, were directly pierced through, not to mention the almost close-at-hand brain. For a time, fresh blood flowed down along the dense branches in streams, and a strong bloody smell permeated the air. Seeing that his opponent was completely dead, in the next moment, Liang Yue retracted his spiritual power, along with the energy that supported the growth of the vine, back into his body. Whoosh! As a result, the originally strong and vibrant verdant vine instantly lost all its vitality, becoming withered and gray, and turned into a pile of ashes and debris. In an instant, the remnants on the branches also fell down one after another, and even the pit on the ground was smoothed out with a wave of his hand. Afterwards, Liang Yue waved his sleeves, turned around, and slowly walked towards his seat outside the arena. Baga! How could Ryunosuke fail? I don't believe it. That guy must have used some conspiracy. Shut up, Narita. At this moment, representatives of all countries with international influence are here. Don't let us become a laughingstock, Narita. Ryunosuke's earth-based ninjutsu has almost reached the peak level in our island nation. I think even in China, it would not be easy for someone to defeat him this time. He was probably targeted by a restraining technique. It should be wood-based, between water and earth, can also be regarded as a combination of the two, and itself belongs to a higher level of existence. For basic earth-based ninjutsu, there will indeed be some attribute-restrained wood-based Taoism. Our island nation is indeed not very good at this type of magic. This matter will never be left like this. In the future, I will definitely get it back with interest. Alright, Basho-say. Let's discuss this matter later. Kimura's Abi 4, Ryunosuke. Now, our island nation has already lost 2 games in a row. The next third game must not, absolutely not, go wrong again. Hi. Unlike the slightly heavy atmosphere on the island nation's side, after Liang Yue won 2 consecutive victories, the Chinese contestant seats also seemed a little relaxed. In fact, apart from the group of islanders opposite, almost everyone sitting and watching in the arena at this time was very active. The ambassadors of various countries and their families can be said to be unconcerned and aloof, marveling when they should marvel, laughing when they should laugh, completely ignoring the thoughts of the island nation's representatives and spectators. For a time, various loud discussions were endless. On the contrary, the Chinese audience and officials were still a little reserved. Some old gentlemen even picked up the airs of the former Celestial Empire again, their faces full of red light, but they still had to put on a profound and pretentious look between the flow of their eyes. It was also difficult to hide the sense of satisfaction and gratification in their hearts. However, compared to the lively and exclamatory words of the people in the audience seats, the focus of discussion among the contestants around Liang Yue was more professional. Some people said that the wood-based Taoism that Liang Yue displayed on the field before seemed to be inconsistent with the laws of ordinary warlocks. And there was no principle of mutual generation and restraint in Kimandungia, which was really confusing. Some people felt that his concept of using magic seemed to be more in line with the true nature of cultivators. What 5 elements and 8 trigrams, mutual generation and restraint? In the end, it still had to be based on oneself. Whether it is technique or concept, it is ultimately just a difference in the means of application, and in the end, it still has to return to oneself. To be honest, Liang Yue was also very curious about the Chinese otherworlder world in the current DC universe, and he also wanted to have in-depth exchanges with these people from different sects. What is the root of all ki, the ancestral key of heaven and earth? Sounds very mysterious. If it can be mutually verified with one's own cultivation system and fully combined, it should be able to spark an unusually brilliant flame. Liang Yue was also very much looking forward to this. However, the current arena was obviously not an ideal place for communication, so, after a few simple exchanges with the others around, everyone returned to calm. At this moment, the Chinese and Japanese representatives on the rostrum had also taken their seats one after another, preparing to draw lots and then begin the third round of ability exchanges. After a while, 2 notes were once again handed to the old man in front of the microphone, who was responsible for announcing the results. The old man opened the note and took a look. The originally smiling old face suddenly showed a look of astonishment, and his lips began to tremble involuntarily. But after a moment of silence, taking a deep breath, and swallowing his saliva, The old man still gritted his teeth and spoke loudly. This Sino-Japanese exchange conference, the third round. The one appearing from the island nation is Liang Yue. The one fighting from China is Dao Yi. That's too much a little. Liang Yue, who was sitting in the contestant seat below, suddenly heard this sound, and the tea he had picked up suddenly stopped in front of him. With a glance, he immediately looked towards Yuan Datao on the rostrum, who knew that Yuan Shike also had a look of astonishment at this time. It's just that his gaze was currently fixed on the young man surnamed Wang on the rostrum, who is responsible for drawing lots. Spreading his hands, opening his mouth, the gaze he cast was also full of incomprehension. That appearance, although he did not speak, clearly expressed a meaning. What's going on with you? You can't keep using the same person all the time. In broad daylight, in the bright world. Chapter 522. Sword name, Soul Eater. Who would have thought that after receiving Yuan Datao's message, the Chinese representative responsible for drawing lots would also feel extremely aggrieved, as it wasn't him who had tampered with it. Therefore, he immediately responded with an innocent expression. Upon seeing this, Yuan Datao was stunned for a moment, and then frowned, tilting his head. He thought about it and seemed to feel that the other party had no need to lie to him, so he subconsciously scratched the back of his head, pondered for a while, but still couldn't figure it out. Looking up, he found that the Japanese representative seemed very dissatisfied with the result at this time. That person was blatantly glaring at him, his eyes full of anger. Seeing this, Yuan Shike immediately grinned and returned a contemptuous and somewhat smug smile to the other party. His appearance was as if he was saying to the other party, "This is all my doing, come and bite me if you dare." Therefore, in the end, even though he knew that his side had some problems with the drawing of lots, Datao could only bite the bullet and accept it temporarily, choosing to let things go anyway. The lots had been drawn, and the votes had been counted in such a public setting, in front of so many well-known Chinese and foreign figures. How could he, the President of the Republic of China, easily go back on his word, now that the procedure had been completed? He could only choose to continue to implement it to the end, leaving aside the battle of facial expressions among the people on the podium, and who ultimately won or lost after hearing his number. Liang Yue, although somewhat surprised in his heart and knowing that something was fishy, didn't delay anything. After greeting his fellow Daoists around him, he sighed softly, got up leisurely, and continued to walk onto the field. His opponent in this round was codenamed Kenichi. Almost without having to think about it, Kenichi naturally referred to the swordsman among the Japanese contestants who ranked first in swordsmanship, and the swordsmanship of the island country is actually swordsmanship among the group of young ladies around Liang Yue. Senior sister Siko and Aunt Yuriko were both masters of this art. Among them, one's swordsmanship route is light and freehand, likes to pass through the chaotic army, and doesn't get stained by a single leaf, while the other is open and close, emphasizes a one-hit kill, and the sword must be stable, accurate, and ruthless. Therefore, Liang Yue confidently knew a bit about the fighting styles of these island warriors, but if it were the other party's information about him, it was estimated that there wouldn't be so much. He could only make some on-the-spot judgments based on his previous performances in several battles. However, based on Liang Yue's previous one-hit kill combat process, it would probably be difficult for the other party to find any useful information from it. Liang Yue's opponent this time was a middle-aged man in the prime of his life. His half-length hair was casually tied into a ponytail and tied behind his head, and the messy hair in front of his forehead was scattered randomly, making him look a bit sloppy. He was wearing a blue and gray traditional Japanese samurai uniform, and a standard-length katana was already in his hand. His eyes looked a little sharp, as if they could emit light. Since entering the arena, his slender eyes had been staring at Liang Yue, never leaving for a moment. Seeing the other party's focused appearance, Liang Yue couldn't help but smile slightly at this time. With a flick of his wide sleeves, two purple short knives suddenly fell from his sleeves and were held in his palms. To say that they are short knives, they are actually only relative to Liang Yue's previous weapons. Then, he stepped forward and walked towards the other party unhurriedly. My sword is called Soul Eater. It is a famous fierce object in our island country. As its name suggests, anyone killed by it will have their soul devoured by this sword, for life, for eternity. They will be enslaved by it. Although he didn't know what the warrior's name was, the other party's routine was quite smooth, and he even knew to report the name of the weapon before officially starting. If you don't know it, you would think he was playing the decisive battle on the Forbidden City with him. My two knives have no names, but every time they chop people, they can cut a target in half. As he said that, Liang Yue's pace began to accelerate, changing from the leisurely walk to trot. With this, in just a few breaths, He had already advanced to within 20 or 30 meters of each other. It wasn't until this time that the samurai on the opposite side finally revealed his on-the-spot strategy for dealing with the enemy. I saw him suddenly turn his body halfway, hiding the katana in his left hand behind his back, and his right hand was holding the hilt of the knife under the messy hair. A handsome face was also facing Liang Yue's direction through the gaps in the strands of hair. At this moment, the eye facing forward appeared particularly intimidating. Oh. This posture, Batajutsu. Looking at the posture displayed by the other party at this moment, a trace of curiosity couldn't help but arise in Liang Yue's heart. Then, I saw the samurai's posture becoming more and more exaggerated, his head lowered again, his eyes almost unable to look forward, but the ear on one side was closer immediately afterwards. As Liang Yue approached step by step, this person suddenly closed his eyelids. Yes, at this moment, this guy was less than 10 meters away from Liang Yue. Closing his eyes, it seemed that he wanted to rely solely on hearing to judge his specific location, and then rely on that, seemingly condensed with all his energy. A batajutsu to kill him with one blow and end the battle directly. Liang Yue didn't not understand the principles of this, but the problem is, aren't you underestimating him? Where does the self-confidence come from? At the moment when the other party closed his eyes, Liang Yue also moved. I saw him at this time, just seemingly unremarkable, stepping lightly on the soles of his feet. And it seemed that there was nothing different from the previous steps, but at this moment, a purple glow suddenly spurted out from under Liang Yue's feet, silently, yet exceptionally brilliant. Whoosh! It was as if it was a jet tail with powerful propulsion capabilities, and in just an instant, it propelled Liang Yue forward for tens of meters. That speed was as if it had surpassed the shackles of space. Everyone present, including those contestants who were aliens, were unable to capture his figure during this process. In that time period, Liang Yue seemed to have suddenly disappeared from this space. In the air, only a straight and dazzling purple light and shadow was still proving his existence. Swish! The next moment, accompanied by a head tilting and gradually falling, a large amount of blood spurted out from the samurai's neck, just like a fire hydrant that suddenly burst open. Many onlookers couldn't help but wonder how such a large pressure could be generated inside the blood vessels of the human body. Then, accompanied by the blood droplets falling all over the sky, Liang Yue walked back slowly with a layer of purple light shield, glanced at the head on the ground, which was full of confusion and seemed to die. With eyes wide open, he reached out and took the famous island sword in his hand from the body of the other party, who was still maintaining the posture of drawing the sword, and when Liang Yue gently brought it, the samurai's headless body immediately lost its balance and fell sideways to the ground in a very stiff posture. Soul Eater? Still a fierce object that shocks the island country? It looks very ordinary. Slowly pulling out a katana in his hand and throwing the scabbard on the ground casually, Liang Yue began to look at this knife, which is said to be able to devour souls. Chapter 523 Animisha. Who do you think you are, putting on airs in front of me, still closing your eyes? What's your physique compared to my quality, huh? You think my average of over 1,000 attribute points is just for show? Or are you saying that the advanced light footwork skill I learned before, Soaring Meteor, was a waste of time, huh? At this moment, Liang Yue was examining the katana in his hand while muttering to himself in a voice that only he seemed to be able to hear. But in reality, even though there was no one in front of Liang Yue, and only a corpse that he had just separated was within a few dozen meters, in fact, in a place that the surrounding people couldn't see, the soul of the samurai, whose head was already separated from his body, was still there. He could see the other party's soul, naturally also thanks to the blessing of the reincarnation eye, and the reason why the samurai's soul stayed here, without dissipating, in Liang Yue's view, was probably not due to some lingering spirit or deep resentment. More likely, it was because of the influence of the sword in his hand. Simply put, this katana did have the effect of devouring souls, and at the time of his death, although the samurai was not struck by it, he had been holding it in his hand. There must be some inextricable connection between them. However, the material of this sword itself doesn't seem to be that outstanding, right? There are no strange spells engraved on the blade, so how could it possess such soul-devouring power for no reason? Clang! As expected, with the blessing of the heavenly tribulation power, the lightning in Liang Yue's body was no longer comparable to ordinary electricity. With just a trace, it instantly shaved off 70 to 80% of the souls trapped within the katana. In an instant, the soul fiend power within it suddenly became agitated and restless. Relying on his extraordinary eyesight, Liang Yue easily discovered a different existence beneath a pile of chaotic soul fragments that was also a soul body, but compared to the other surrounding soul bodies, its color was darker, with a face full of fangs, angry eyes, and a single horn on its forehead originally. It seemed to be sleeping deep within this blade, and after being rammed by the power of the heavenly tribulation, it was immediately awakened. The blood-red eyes suddenly opened, and from afar, they met Liang Yu's gaze in the arena. In the next moment, a semi-transparent silver smoke rose up from the katana in Liang Yu's hand. In an instant, the smoke seemed to be endless, continuously gathering in the sky above the arena like a sticky paste. After only a few breaths, even the ordinary people in the surrounding stands could easily notice the unusualness above the arena. Some children with simpler minds, or ordinary people with stronger perception, could even directly see the large cloud of rising silver-gray substance. Faced with everything that was happening before him, Liang Yue did not try to stop it until the black smoke in the katana in his hand was completely released, forming a gray, soft, semi-transparent cotton ball about 30 meters in diameter in the sky. Immediately afterward, the silver sphere began to shrink rapidly inward, eventually turning into a 3-meter-high, almost solid demon face around the ghost face. There were also clusters of blue ghost fire floating. Mortal, is it you who is disturbing my slumber? With a resonance of wind and smoke, a voice that was both similar and dissimilar, both roaring and singing, suddenly sounded in the air. This voice seemed very ethereal, somewhat with a meaning of ghosts crying and wolves howling, and if you weren't careful, it might be mistaken for a gust of wind blowing. However, looking at the face of the ghost in front of him, looking down at him with a threatening expression, although he didn't feel the kind of pure malice from the other party, Liang Yue couldn't help but sneer. Then he decided not to indulge its bad habits. A little ghost, daring to call itself a god in front of me? Cut the antenna. Along with a soft murmur like a whisper, a powerful suction force suddenly rose from Liang Yue's palm. In an instant, a strong wind began to blow in the arena, with dust and fallen leaves dancing wildly. The wailing wind roared throughout the arena. A violent tornado suddenly rose, but the center was on Liang Yue's small palm. Looking at the ghost face at this time, the ghost fire around it had already been extinguished without a trace, and the original 3-meter-high, majestic and ferocious face was suddenly stretched into a husky dog face. After a desperate struggle, an unwilling huddle, it still couldn't resist the powerful attraction and was directly sucked into Liang Yue's palm. Then, along with a large pile of air, it was formed into a semi-transparent silver-gray ping-pong ball. After trapping the evil ghost, Liang Yue also stopped outputting. In an instant, the wind stopped and the sky was clear. The violent whirlwind also disappeared in an instant between the restless and uneasy agitation and the quiet. At this moment, this dramatic contrast suddenly made the surrounding audience in the arena extremely uncomfortable. It was as if everything before was an illusion, and nothing had ever happened. However, Liang Yue didn't care about the feelings of others at this time. With a slight tremor of his palm, a ball of scorching white flame suddenly appeared out of thin air, dancing and flaunting. In the blink of an eye, it submerged the ping-pong ball in his palm that was already close to solid. Under the scorching heat of this flame, wisps of gray gas began to float up constantly, which were the remnants of the silver-gray ghost face being burned into ashes after being burned at high temperature. Of course, what was burned was only a small part of the ghost face. The evil ghost that was balled up in front of him was indeed a bit capable, and even with the power of Liang Yue's flame, it could not be completely eliminated in a short time. So, after discovering this situation, this guy also snorted lightly with a thought. The power of thunder and heaven was activated. Zilla-la-la. In an instant, the violent arc of electricity also covered it. Under the interweaving of thunder and fire, a long sound of compromise and begging for mercy suddenly came from within the silver-gray sphere. I dare to kill a god? No. Don't kill me. Human, stop it. I can give you power. Don't kill me. I am willing to recognize you as master. Human. Stop it. I don't want to recognize me as master? I don't just take any trash. What value do you have to me? Hearing the words of the sphere in his palm, Liang Yue subconsciously slowed down his offensive and began to ask with interest. I can give you an ability that allows you to strengthen your weapons and armor by absorbing the power of souls, and I can teach you many weapon skills also. I can increase your combat power in a short time. However, all of this requires the consumption of soul power as a price. Oh? This ability of yours sounds a bit familiar. Animisha. Liang Yue heard the words, immediately tilted his head, and replied with some surprise, yes. In Japan, people who are given the power of only by me are called animisha, so, you are still a bit useful. Hearing the other party's words, Liang Yue subconsciously touched his chin, and said with a slightly thoughtful look in his eyes. Not bad. Since you are still a bit of a figure locally, how could you be parasitic in such a broken sword? That's just my temporary residence, just for resting. I can throw it away at any time if I want to. Is that so? Well, then you can stay by my side for now." Saying that, Liang Yue looked at the silver ball in his palm that had completely quieted down, and after tossing it in his hand, he opened his Amino Iwado and threw it in. "Stay in there honestly and don't make trouble." Chapter 524 Buddha 1. With a crisp clang sound after storing the little ghost, the knife in his hand naturally became useless, so Liang Yue casually threw it on the ground. Although this knife once housed a ghost that could devour and utilize soul power, the knife itself is only made of ordinary carbon steel at most. It has only been forged a few more times. Such a thing is really hard to become. Liang Yue's collection, to be placed on the display cabinet in the base world, and after that ghost was subdued by him, the samurai's soul, which was originally drawn by some force and temporarily unable to leave, was now without any obstruction and soon dissipated with a wind. Winner. China's side. Dao Yi. As the old man on the podium once again announced the victory in a loud voice, the audience burst into an uproar once again. In comparison, the competition seats on both sides seemed a little quiet at this time. Liang Yue's companions on the Chinese side were a little shocked by the methods Liang Yue had shown before. This was a hidden weapon, then a spell, then swordsmanship. Immediately afterward, he also showed the 3 series of Taoism: thunder, fire, and wind. It really shouldn't be possible for a young man like Liang Yue, who looks less than 20 years old, to master such a complete set of abilities. Moreover, every method he showed was quite profound. Most importantly, he can use them appropriately when fighting the enemy, thereby directly causing a sure kill effect on the target. This kind of clean and neat technique, readily available, and a calm attitude without any taboos. It seems ordinary, without too much flashy operation. As for Liang Yue's previous performance, everyone can only silently add a note in their hearts with the name of genius. Huh? Where have you two been? Why are you only coming back now, after returning to his seat and simply dealing with a few teammates? When he looked up, Nana and Xiao Zhao, who had been missing since getting off the car and didn't know where they had run off to, actually appeared hand in hand again at this time. They each had a delicate red maple branch inserted in their heads. In their hands, they each held a few bags of melon seeds, hazelnuts, pine nuts, and so on, looking like they had just returned from shopping. But the problem is, in order to keep it secret and isolate the general public, there are no vendors selling things in this competition area. We were just over there, and we saw a very cute little girl, so we took some snacks to tease her for a while. Yes. Sister Xiao Zhao also said that the little girl is the embodiment of spirituality and wanted to take her as a disciple. Yes, it's a pity her parents didn't agree. Stay here honestly, don't run around anymore. After listening to the two women's echoing words, Liang Yue knew that they were talking nonsense without even thinking, but he was too lazy to care about the little thoughts of the two women in private. After taking their seats, the two also behaved exceptionally well, even obsequiously pouring tea, making water, peeling melon seeds, and so on were all taken for granted, which made his teammates around him frequently glance sideways. Compared to the harmony and unity on the Chinese side, and the winning streak of 3 games, the Japanese team on the opposite side seemed much more dull. The defeat and death of 3 generals in a row had repeatedly frustrated their originally high-spirited spirit, especially the defeat and death of Liang Yue and Jian Yi, the 2 powerhouses who were at the forefront of the team. The scene of being cleanly killed that happened before their eyes was really frightening. Although those who can sit in the competition seats at this time are all top powerhouses from various fields in Japan, and they are also people with excellent minds and strong self-cultivation, but the increasingly bleak situation is also imperceptibly affecting their mentality. Therefore, for a while, the people on the Japanese side inevitably began to feel a little confused, although it was not enough to reach the point of self-doubt. But in their minds, there have inevitably been a few traces of irritability. It is difficult to maintain the same high fighting spirit, arrogance, and even a calm state of mind as at the beginning of the competition. In this way, after a long silence, as the official team leader of this team, a middle-aged man in a suit finally took a deep breath and recovered from the previous changes, looking around, and then opening his mouth with a bit of determination. Gentlemen, this time, it concerns the face of our imperial country. It is an important step for our great island country to stand among all nations. At present, the people of our island country are experiencing pain. They have gone through all kinds of difficulties, overcome obstacles, and finally made us have today's status. We are the elite powerhouses in various fields of the imperial country, summoned by His Majesty the Emperor himself, bearing an unshakable responsibility. At this moment, we can no longer be decadent. Being timid, hesitating, and looking forward and backward will not only lose our own face, the entire imperial country will lose face because of this. Gentlemen, be loyal to the Emperor. Soon, The draw for the fourth game began. The representatives of China and Japan once again walked onto the podium and drew their respective lots under the watchful eyes of everyone. Then, under the gaze of the people in the arena, and under the close scrutiny of the Japanese representative, the old man with flower hair finally did not call out the name of Liang Yue this time. This time, the fourth game of the China-Japan Exchange Conference. The representative of the Chinese side is Fu Yi. The representative of the Japanese side is Yang Yue. After hearing the old man's name, there was a lot of discussion in the audience. The representatives of the Japanese side, along with those contestants under the stage, all breathed a sigh of relief at this time. Finally changed people, whether they are willing to admit it or not. Liang Yue has caused great psychological pressure on the Japanese players through 3 consecutive victories. Facing such an unfavorable situation, it is definitely unrealistic to say that they don't care at all. Perhaps in their hearts, there will be various kinds of counterattacks, such as "it's just like that. If I were on, I would definitely be able to," and so on. But facing Liang Yue's kind of almost bottomless, unpredictable, and always able to give them a sure kill invisible power using the convenience of the rules to directly change an opponent is undoubtedly the smartest choice for the Japanese side now. They have finally realized this wish. The appearance of a new opponent, in turn, made them see the hope of victory. They need a victory too much, perhaps. The previous Liang Yue was just an accident. Perhaps that kind of person is even regarded as a heterogeneous existence in China, and cannot be treated equally with ordinary aliens. Perhaps, other than him, other people are not that strong. With this kind of mentality, the contestants on the Japanese side began to regain their confidence and temporarily put everything behind them with a cautious mentality. But immediately afterward, with the emergence of this idea, a sense of humiliation began to occupy their hearts imperceptibly. Chapter 525 Crazy Stick Technique. As the name suggests, Buddha 1 naturally refers to an extraordinary figure from the Buddhist lineage, and in China, the famous Shaolin Temple has, for many years, become the leading tradition in Central Plains Buddhism. Therefore, the code name Buddha 1 at this time also originates from Shaolin, the ancestral home of Zen Buddhism. This is almost undisputed, and no one will argue with him about it at this moment because, compared to the Taoist lineage, which is full of talent and elites, only Shaolin Temple came from the Buddhist tradition. This time other larger Buddhist traditions, such as Tibetan Buddhism, did not send anyone at all. Of course, whether Yuan Datao sent someone to deliver a letter is still unknown. However, don't underestimate the fact that only Shaolin has come from the vast Chinese Buddhist community. Although it seems to be alone, its own strength should definitely not be underestimated. Shaolin Temple sent a total of 4 people this time, namely an old, a middle-aged, and 2 young ones. Among them, the middle-aged one is said to be the current chief of the Disciplinary Academy of Shaolin. In the prime of his life, the 2 young people are one his personal disciple, and the other is the closed-door disciple of the Shaolin abbot. One of the 2 had previously confronted Liang Yue in the loose cultivator selection competition. Although he did not dare to come down and fight him, his own strength was definitely remarkable. His Shaolin Golden Bell cover has already reached a considerable level. As for the remaining old man, it is said that he is a senior master who has retired from his position in the temple and has long ignored worldly affairs. But this time, he felt something in his heart and specially came out to travel with his younger generation. Liang Yue, through his own realm perception and with the assistance of the Tensigen, has some understanding of this old monk's cultivation in terms of internal strength alone. The opponent is probably in the late stage of the Xiantian realm, barely reaching the edge of the Xiantian peak. Still a little distance from great perfection. However, this old monk's own methods are somewhat special. In addition to a wooden fish stick used for self-defense, there is actually a Buddhist internal force with a very high energy level hidden in his body. Even with Liang Yue's current foundation establishment stage spiritual power quality, it is still slightly inferior in comparison. Of course, the gap between them has not reached a difference in quality level. Simply put, the levels of both are still at the foundation establishment level, but that Buddhist internal force is probably in the late stage of foundation establishment, while Liang Yue is still stuck in the early stage. That's why Liang Yue himself has not yet settled on the internal force of the late stage of foundation establishment. How could a little old man have such a bargain to take advantage of? Moreover, energy is energy, and combat power is not just a simple comparison of the amount of energy. Soon, after the gray-haired old man on the rostrum finished reading the lottery results, there was movement in the rest areas of both China and Japan. Unlike the Japanese side, where almost one person represents one token, in China, except for Liang Yue, almost every code name represents a tradition. For example, the Onmyaji 1 called out at this time refers to the number 1 Onmyaji from the Japanese side in China. It is often based on sex among them. The Shaolin sect is the most cunning, the other sects are a little better, basically only sending 2 or 3 disciples of the same generation, such as senior brothers and sisters at most. They carry a few magic weapons or talismans bestowed by the sect for self-preservation. What they think about is just to be substitutes for each other, and to have someone to take care of them at critical moments. Now, Shaolin Temple is doing well, with 3 generations of old, middle-aged, and young all coming facing the opponents from the island country. They only need to choose their opponents based on their strength. This is the legendary home field advantage, and the benefit of the sect's long history. Extensive and profound knowledge, which if the people present doesn't understand the simple principle of Tianji's horse racing. Therefore, seeing that the Onmyaji who came on stage from the Japanese contestant seat was a middle-aged man, the old monk from Shaolin almost didn't hesitate carrying the large wooden fish stick that he brought, which had already been polished to a dark and shiny state. He shouted softly and strode to the center of the arena. This figure, this speeded, is definitely much more agile than the young monk who met Liang Yue in the selection competition before, due to the language barrier between the 2 participating parties. After entering the arena, the old monk and the Onmyaji on the opposite side did not say much nonsense, and almost started fighting directly as soon as they landed. Thanks to Liang Yue's good rhythm in the first 3 games, this Sino-Japanese Extraordinary People Exchange Conference was directly upgraded to a battle of life and death. It's either you die, or I die. So, since the beginning, both sides have not shown any intention of holding back. Every move and every style is aimed at killing the other party. Of course, necessary probing is certainly indispensable even in a duel between masters. When both sides do not understand each other, they will definitely have some caution in their hearts. For example, after the opening, the old monk directly activated the golden bell cover, one of the 4 great Shaolin skills, in addition to the surface of his body being coated with a layer of golden paint, just like the monk during the selection competition. There is also a layer of divine light around him that has already transformed into the image of a golden bell, constantly surrounding his sight. It looks quite high-end. However, apart from this, the offensive methods displayed by this old monk are somewhat unremarkable. Apart from wielding the large wooden fish stick in his hand and chasing the Onmyaji around the arena with a set of mad demon staff techniques, perhaps his body skills used for rushing and chasing can also be regarded as a good inheritance. But if you say that this old monk does not possess more than a dozen other Shaolin stunts, Liang Yue definitely does not believe it. The same is true for the Onmyaji on the opposite side. Although he was only able to cast a spell similar to the wind control technique, which can increase his movement speed, at the beginning of the old monk's opening attack and chase. After that, he has been running away all the way, relying on a strange body skill, and began to drift around the arena. He often only has time to pinch a few hand seals before being forcibly interrupted by the old monk wielding a stick like herding ducks, which is really flustered, but is an Onmyaji and the number 1 Onmyaji that the island country can produce on the field at this time. How could he not have his own Shikigami? End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.